May I call the House to order? A very good afternoon to you all. Honorable Speaker Sir, Advocate Mdenda, President of the Senate, Madam Chinomona, all protocol observed. This is a continuation from the morning session on the macroeconomic stability, inclusive growth engagement continued. So we are going to continue, but perhaps with different personalities in terms of presentations and also those to respond. You will see that according to the program, the Minister of Finance is going to be, somebody will be responding to the presentation from Honorable Mona. Then we will have Honorable Molokele as the chairperson, and then Professor Murwira, Minister, to respond. I'll be very strict on time, and I will congratulate those who actually take the shortest time in terms of their input. Allow me then to invite my first presenter, who is Honorable Mona, the chairperson of the Budget and Finance and Economic Development, to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Once again, good afternoon to you all. Let me acknowledge the presence of our Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, say Advocate Jacob Francis Mdenda, Madam President of the Senate, Madam Mebo Chinomona, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Madam Gezi, in absentia, Deputy President of Senate, Minister of State for Provincial Affairs, Baba Bamoyo, Honorable Minister of Finance, Professor Mtuli Ngube, Honorable Ministers here present, Honorable Chiefs, Anababa Edu Madzimambo, Makatungamirirwa, na Baba Mshane, ndo varipo, ndinogamuchirai, Honorable Chief Whips, members of the Standing Rules and Orders Committee, our bosses, honorable members, my fellow chairpersons, allow me to say all protocol observed. I'm actually happy to stand before you now in this afternoon session, having had quite a hectic program in the morning, but the good thing is that we managed to touch a number of issues. Honorable Speaker, say your committee had a very detailed, comprehensive report, and I'm glad to say some of the issues that were topical were actually highlighted, and the Minister is going to be having a less task in terms of administering and responding to some of the issues, because you were also touching as we were gravitating towards the first session. So allow me to say my presentation, basically the introduction calls upon the statutory requirement that we are mandated as a committee. And in terms of Section 141 of our Supreme Constitution, we are actually mandated to go to the public, the masses of Zimbabwe, so that they input their submissions to the crafting of this noble policy, which is the budget 2. And not only that, also Section 13, subsection 2 of the Constitution buttresses Section 141, and the Public Finance Management Act, Chapter 28, subsection 5, also talks about the minister coming before Parliament to solicit for views. The Portfolio Committee on Budget and Economic Development Committee conducted countrywide budget consultations from the 22nd of September to the 27th. Submissions were received from ordinary citizens, women's groups, the business community, farmers, CSOs, and the disabled, school children, etc. And the committee received submissions from a number of stakeholders, as you can see, that including the BARS, ZNCC, and submissions from the Minister of Finance, pertinent to consider these views in order to give the consultative process the necessary credibility and to satisfy the aspirations of the people. The economic context, I'm sure where we have been briefed about this, the status quo of our economy, and I'll not labor you to go through the numbers that you're actually seeing, because in all the presenters touched on the status of the economy. But just to say we've got a plethora of challenges, but however, they are not insurmountable. It's something that we have, and we hope there is light at the end of the tunnel. So it is a prayer for the people of Zimbabwe to unite and also advocate for the same cause, that we change our nation, the only beautiful country that we have. The committee observations, 2020 budget strategy. The committee notes with concern that the projected growth rate of 2019 is now negative 0.65, but I'm happy that the minister touched on the issue to say how he is going to end the year on a stronger point. But with economy facing other challenges such as foreign currency, supply and allocation inefficiencies, exchange rate misalignment, just to mention but a few, the ministry must move with speed to address those concerns. Honorable members, honorable speaker, say, Madam President, that diagram shows what it actually entails is we've got the Zimbabwe economy scenario game board. On the top left corner, we are having stagnation and hemorrhage, where if we have got price stability, but witnessing the issues to do with corruption and confidence deficit, the country will not move. And if you go to the upper right corner, where we talk of economic prosperity, it means we have got price stability, and there is also confidence building and honesty in the nation. Therefore, we would have. However, the bottom left, the economy can go into ICU if we don't manage and harness the issue of hyperinflationary issues and also have confidence deficiency. So you find that, however, having the issues to do with inflation managing and doing away with corruption, which is cancerous, you find that we'll have light at the end of the tunnel. Honorable Speaker, say, your committee went around the country of Zimbabwe to solicit for views, and the submissions are as follows from a number of stakeholders. Stakeholders consulted spoke in unison on the need for government to direct resources towards health, education, agriculture, manufacturing, mining, infrastructure in order to improve the welfare of the ordinary Zimbabweans. Bemoaned policy inconsistency in government and the discord between monetary and fiscal policies, as well as the ravaging effects of austerity measures pursued by government in 2018. I'm glad to say that the Honorable Minister, Professor, talked about that, but I was just whispering to him to just wish him that 2023 must be given a constituency so that when we start engaging one another, you'll be hearing what the people from the constituents will be saying. So, honorable members, the issue of we cannot overemphasize the essence of agriculture. Government must subsidize agricultural inputs at producer level. Why we are saying at producer level? Because that's where the manufacturing happens. That's where the production happens. So if we then do our subsidies there, it means everyone is going to benefit. So I'm sure that is very important, and I'm glad the Honorable retired Air Chief Marshal is here. And inputs, presidential inputs should be availed timelessly and in the right mix to make meaningful impact. Climate mitigation and adaptation measures through investments in irrigation infrastructure. The issue of irrigation, I'm sure Dr. Mangunjika touched that and dealt much on that to say this is long overdue. And some raised concern on the continued funding of the program from the fiscus. And I'm glad to say that there is a model that the banks are going to be funded, as the Honorable Minister alluded to in the morning. And government is urged to adhere to the provisions of the Maputo Declaration of 2003 in agriculture and food security, which requires the expenditure on land, agriculture, water, and sanitation, that it must be 10% of the budget. We are only asking for 10%, and we need to adhere to that, to the Maputo Declaration. Agri financing remains the major challenge to the growth of the sector. The committee commends the Minister for setting aside funds to support agriculture well in time in the supplementary budget. Build credibility for smart agriculture by abiding with the undertaking that selection of beneficiary farmers and suppliers will be done in a transparent manner and target farmers with good track record of honoring obligations. Most communal farmers have lost livestock, and Honorable Speaker say this is quite disheartening. And I'm one of the victims who has actually lost everything in terms of the livestock. And I'm glad to say we hail from the same province with the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, who can actually be a testimony to that effect, that we have lost the numbers, I don't know, maybe beginning of January, over 200,000 or so, but in our district, over 5,000. And you can imagine now the challenge that we are going to be having in terms of the drought power, where our communal farmers are not having anything to resort to, and they are doing the traditional manual way of digging holes. And Honorable Minister, this is a plea so that you can revisit this issue. And the issue of provision of dipping chemicals cannot be overemphasized. Livestock deaths, you can see, it's quite terrible. And honorable members, honorable speaker say, this is real. And the sad part of it is you just lose a beast which is quite healthy. And the following day it won't be feeding, and then that's it. And we need to pray that some of the people from Harare, maybe if I can share this, the moment one sees that the cattle is suffering from that disease, it was called January disease. But truly we can equate it to the HIV because there was no cure to that effect. And we're losing our livestock in masses. So at the end of the day, there are some unscrupulous dealers who are taking this from our districts to the abattoirs, and we're having this meat. And thank God you are still alive. I'm sure you were feeding on some of this. The 2020 budget must introduce agricultural input subsidies to provide at producer level. I'm sure I've touched on that. And the Minister of Finance must come up with a clear and transparent funding model. And I'm sure the Minister talked about that. And to prioritize establishment of a commodities exchange. And I'm sure one of the members from the floor posed the issue and the essence of commodities exchange, which has to be executed with speed. I've taken much time on agriculture because of its essence. To restore stakeholder confidence in the Command Agriculture program and restore its credibility, the 2020 budget must provide for a forensic audit of the program with the aim of weeding out corrupt elements and recovering misused and abused resources. Investment in irrigation, once again, is coming out. Recapitalize the Department of Extension Services and District Development Fund. And I'm sure the DDF is also working on the provision of clean water by drilling boreholes across the nation. The mining sector, Honorable Speaker say, prolonged power outages, inadequate forex allocations, and sustainability in terms of high costs of production and human capital flight is problematic. And you find that the committee noted that the sector is being weighed down by other challenges related to the doing business environment. These include payment of royalties in forex, skills flight, high mining fees and charges, and the general and friendly business environment. The committee notes with concern disrespect of the environmental rights enshrined in Section 73, subsection 1, paragraph A, subparagraph B of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. The finalization of the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill, my fellow chair, I'm sure will elaborate more on that, but it's a long-awaited bill in the Augusta House. Yes, it came and then His Excellency had some issues, and we are still awaiting the coming in of the bill in this second section. Regularization of the operations of small-scale and artisanal miners is peremptory. The 2020 budget and must actualize the streamlining of taxes and reduction in fiscal charges by finalizing the new fiscal framework for the sector, review of the current fees in line with best practice, harmonization of rural district council charges, and replacement of the 2% for the exploitation of the environment levy with the mines closure rehabilitation insurance product that is under consideration by the Minister of Mines. This, Honorable Speaker, must respect those who have paid in advance in terms of foreign currency. They must honor their obligations. The 2020 budget provides for revision of forex retention thresholds to promote investment. This is quite topical, and it's a debate that is ongoing, that the retentions are not adequate. And our Honorable Speaker you have touched on that, the essence to have adequate retentions. And you also talked about the gold, London gold bullion market, Honorable Speaker, during your opening remarks. And the setting up of the mining cadastral information system, we have been seeing this year in, year out, and I'm sure this time we'll get it right. Since 2011, government repeatedly expressed interest to join Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, known as EITI, or to resuscitate the Zimbabwe Mining Revenue Transparency Initiative, ZMRTI, and there is procrastination in this area. And during the last budget cycle, Honorable Professor touched on the EITI, and I'm sure this time we'll move with speed. In 2020, let us deliver on mining sector transparency reforms as required by the Constitution. Section 315, subsection 2, paragraph C, provides for an act of parliament to guide negotiation and performance of mining agreements to ensure transparency, honest, cost-effectiveness, and competitiveness. Honorable Speaker it's quite sad, and I'm glad to say during the first session, your committee managed also to have a joint session with the Mines Committee in order to pursue the mining fiscal regimes. That's where we are losing money. Yes, others might say it's not under the purview of the committee, but when it comes to leakages, this is a budgetary issue. And we need to move with speed. Honorable Speaker as we gravitate towards this second session, your committee is going to pursue these mining companies to see how we can plug those leakages. We also need to minimize use of tax exemptions and holidays and undertake periodic review of exemptions to ensure that the original case for the granting of exemption still applies. This calls for monitoring and evaluation, Honorable Speaker that you talked about, where we are not monitoring some of the good policies that we have. Manufacturing sector, Honorable Speaker distinguished delegates. Erratic key enablers of industry such as water, electricity, and good transport networks, reliance on generators for power is not sustainable. And it also adds to the cost of doing business. Acute shortage of foreign currency, I'm sure it has been talked about. The business community raised concern that they are subjected to double taxation through corporate tax and the 2% IMT tax. Members of the public also vehemently opposed the 2% tax and called for its scrapping. Remember, honorable members, these are the views of the people. And the question was, you only come to us, but you don't implement some of the recommendations. So these are the views emanating from the people of Zimbabwe. The industry representative groups bemoan the need for clarity on deficit financing. And Statutory Instrument 145 of 2019, which gives monopoly to Grain Marketing Board for the marketing of maize, was welcomed as being helpful in averting a short-term food need, but in the long term, private sector participation in procurement and financing of grain production must be encouraged, Honorable Speaker expanding tax bans and increasing the tax-free threshold for payee is something that the Honorable Minister has to look into. Currently, it's pegged at 700, but surely given the cost of the basket, your committee, Honorable Speaker, is advocating for 3,500. adequate ZIMRA funding to plug loopholes and improve border systems, efficiency, modernization of infrastructure at ports. Honorable Speaker, your committee had a chance to visit some of these border posts, those very busy border posts. And what we witnessed there at some of the border posts is an eyesore. And it calls for this august House to lobby for the funding of such noble tools of trade to ZIMRA. The incentive for investments in alternative sources of energy cannot be overemphasized. The 2020 Finance Act should provide for rationalization of duty regimes for imported raw materials and finished products by removing inconsistencies like on fluorescent bulbs, where no duty is charged on the finished products, yet there is duty on components for the local manufacturer. Health, Honorable Speaker, said, the government is urged to meet the Abuja Declaration of 2000 on health, which actually stipulates that the health budget must be 15%. And it's quite commendable that the Honorable Minister, apparently in his maiden budget presentation, he was actually having about 8 point something percent. But we are only calling as Parliament that let us have the 15% towards the health sector. Section 29, subsection 1 of the Supreme Constitution obliges the state to take practical measures to ensure that the provision of health service to every Zimbabwean citizen is a basic human right. Government should allocate the health sector enough resources to rehabilitate all government hospitals and build more hospitals and clinics to enhance easy access of health facilities. Capacitate NATFAM to ensure easy access to drugs and medicines in hospitals. Non-communicable disease like cancer should be prioritized and probably establish a well-resourced cancer hospital or introduce cancer levy. I will elaborate on the cancer levy. It's not a new text, but it will be shared in tandem with the AIDS levy. An outcry on the high incidences of maternal mortality, especially in the rural areas, mainly attributed to inadequate maternal care, high maternity fees, shortage of skilled personnel, lack of obstetric care, equipment, and essential drugs, among other essentials. Rising healthcare costs, benchmarked in US dollars. Medical insurance is dead for now, Honorable Speaker said. Sexual and reproductive health rights, sanitary wear, Honorable Speaker said, and access to contraceptives. No action despite several undertakings for free distribution. 2019 national budget intention for scrapping VAT and customs duty on selected imported sanitary wear, statutory instrument 264 and 265 for 2018 eroded by inflation. ZIM wholly reliant on donor funding for all contraceptives. This is a sad situation, Honorable Speaker said. Imagine if the donor community decides to pull the plug. What will happen to our mothers, our sisters, our aunts? Ongoing strikes by medical doctors has crippled our health sector. Nutrition issues are topical. Health needs for the elderly and kids directive for free medical attention not supported by resources. Honorable Speaker said, non-communicable diseases like cancer should be prioritized and probably establish a well-resourced cancer, and I'm sure I've touched on that. The budget should provide resources for scraping of user fees in hospitals, especially to enhance access to maternal health. Kenya and Malawi established a dedicated budget line for family planning. This is my humble plea, Honorable Speaker, say, to the Honorable Professor to consider a budget line item for the family planning issues, to address those issues accordingly. Right to basic primary education now under education is mandated under Section 27(1) of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. Policies should be gravitating towards free basic primary education in all sectors. Concern raised on poultry support given to BIM, funds not released on time. Shortages of textbook or referral material. The citizens also urge government to adequately fund the cadetship or revert back to the loans or grants for students in tertiary institutions. Teachers must be trained to teach local languages. Honorable Speaker say, we had a tough time in Kariba, where one of the members was speaking in Tonga and he refused vehemently to speak in English or any other language. And we, apparently with one of my members who had just basic understanding of Tonga, but it was quite problematic. And we must move in line with the Constitution, which talks of our 16 languages. Yes. Honorable Speaker said ring fencing at least 50% of the IMT for provision of basic primary education in 2019 brings much needed buy-in of the tax given its widespread condemnation and resistance. Moreover, since the Minister of Finance has been on record saying there is no going back on the tax, using the money to support free basic education is a noble recommendation, which gives the much needed credibility to the tax. Without abrogating the responsibility of government in providing education infrastructure and equipment, school infrastructure development bestowed on local authorities through the Devolution Fund. Honorable Speaker says research and development to be fully supported. This is something that is lacking in our organization, in our government departments. The 2020 budget should set aside resources for an education equalization fund to fund rural education and development. Higher and tertiary education, my fellow chairman is seated here. I'm sure this is also your area. Government urged to invest in vocational training centers. I've talked about the cadetship, and also government to prioritize funding the PSIP at all local universities and colleges. Water and sanitation, Honorable Speaker, sir. The citizens lamented over the lack of access to water and sanitation in most parts of the country, which the committee visited. Budget must set aside resources to drill boreholes, and I'm sure the DDF is doing this, and prioritize funding of the ongoing dam construction, which is currently underway. The city of Harare aging water infrastructure, now unable to cope with increased population, is problematic. Delayed release of finances by Zinara belonging to debtors, inflation and exchange rate. Thank you, Madam Moderator. That's water and sanitation. I'll just go through some of the slides, if you can go through because of the sake of time, though I would have loved to go deeper. Committee recommendations, water and sanitation. The government to adhere to the constitutional provision in Section 301, subsection 3 of the Constitution, allocating not less than 5% of its budget to local authorities. And I'm glad to say during the second session, there is the alignment of the Public Finance Management Act, which has got a component of devolution, where the provinces are going to administer their own funds, and I'm sure that is going to be addressed. Micro SMEs and informal sector, public called the government to work closely with the informal sector associations with a view to craft strategies to the formalization. I'm sure we discuss more on the informal sector. I will not labor you with that. The ministry, I will also not go into detail on those. The key result areas is given. The ministry, the policy priorities is also given. Technology is failing me. I don't know. Yes, okay. Minister of Finance budget, I will not delve much into that. Reporting requirements, maybe compliance with, I'm sure this is topical, Honorable Speaker say, ministry submitting financial statements without giving information on strategic planning. I'm sure we talked about that. Section 34, subsection 2 of the PFMA mandates every accounting officer to submit monthly financial statements and reports, and we kindly ask the Honorable Minister to adhere to that. Inconsistency in ministry report figures and Blue Book, we witnessed that in the last presentation. The figures on the financial statements are inconsistent. Honorable Minister, these are some of the issues the committee is concerned about. I'm sure we'll share more into that. Unfortunately, you might not be seeing some of those issues, but what we are basically saying as a committee, Honorable Speaker say, is that ZIMRA is doing such a wonderful job in terms of revenue mobilization, but when you find that they don't have a retention figure that they do have, so it's a proposal from the Honorable Committee, Honorable Speaker say, to actually allow ZIMRA to have a fund if they meet their targets, so that they can also cover their operational costs and other costs to revenue. Audit issues. The ministry is also supposed to appraise the committee on how it is addressing the recommendations from the Auditor General. Honorable Speaker, you talked about that. The 2018 report is the following repeat offenses, and as they are detailed, and I'm sure we discussed about the Auditor General in the splendid job Madam Chiri is doing, and we now need for the implementation. Committee recommendations, I'll rush through this. Ministry, apparently the one administering PFMA should abide by PFMA reporting requirements. The 2020 Finance Act should introduce a simplified tax for small business because the presumptive tax is selective and does not cover everyone. Zimbabwe must introduce mechanism to tax technology like accessing a website such as YouTube. The moment you download something on YouTube, America is being credited. So Zimra was saying, how best can we tap into that noble area so that we also benefit as a nation? The Finance Act should provide for sufficient time to adjust to new measures and break away from sudden policy changes which confuse the market. I'm sure this was discussed in the morning. Corruption, Honorable Speaker said. The general public noted with concern the amount of revenue government is losing through the cancerous cage of corruption. The public wants to see more convictions, not catch and release. The public wants to see the concern of the lack of implementation of the AG's audit findings, concern over the lack of visibility of the work of the Zimbabwe anti-corruption. I'm sure now we've got a different dimension where our ZAC is trying to do more work. And I'm glad to say, Honorable Speaker said, during this session we also have the money laundering bill, where there is the addition of Chapter 3 of the money laundering bill, where we are trying to give more powers to ZAC, ZRP, ZIMRA, so that they have more teeth. Setting revenue targets, ports of entry commensurate with average import value, conducting a transparent diamond auction system. I'm sure this is very important. And institutions should be structured in a manner that prevents rent-seeking behavior. We're talking about the regulatory authorities. The budget should provide for sustainable livelihoods of the vulnerable and other institutionalized groups, among others, getting assistance from social welfare as opposed to handouts. The budget should target to empower people rather than making them reliant on handouts year in, year out. The 2% IMT should be ring-fenced for the provision, and I'm sure we will discuss that. Public has a perception that RBZ lacks independence. The first step is to amend the RBZ Act so that RBZ governor should not chair the Monetary Policy Committee and also the RBZ board. But as of now, he is mandated to do that according to the RBZ Act. Other recommendations, as I gravitate towards concluding, Honorable Speaker, say, improve on the frequency and transparency with regards to communication of key macroeconomic indicators. I'm sure we talked about that in the morning. Provision of timely information to stakeholders and realizing the multiplicity of SIEs is something that we talked about. That the role of lawmaking is enshrined in the Parliament of Zimbabwe, according to Section 134. So primary lawmaking function of Parliament in manner of subsidiary legislation to be observed. The government has been issuing SIs, I'm sure this we talked about in the morning. To restore confidence, we talked about it, so I'll not go through again. As per the committee recommendations, last year we expect the revised PFMA to provide for a charter of fiscal responsibilities. This will then be having the terms of references, the expectations, so that the Honorable Minister is measured according to his promises. The issuance of TBs should be strictly for financing productive expenditure, and government introduced a huge penalty for non-productive on farm land. Parliament, Honorable Speaker, say, Madam President, the committee is concerned with the adequate budget allocation to Parliament, which have resulted in most service providers withdrawing their services to Parliament. Parliament should manage its own funds and have access to resources, and when needed to carry out its mandate consistent with Section 325, subsection B of the Constitution. The committee therefore recommends that Parliament administers and manages its own budget with resources released at least quarterly. Parliament cannot queue for funds together with other government departments. A win-win situation can be created by implementing a wholesome package where members are given monthly stipend and are allowed to manage their own affairs. We cannot overemphasize this. Honorable Speaker, say, just for statistics, each honorable member is taking about 193,500 to the hotels, and assuming that is a 50% to the honorable member to manage his or her affairs, that would only call for 81,000, and it will go a long way in mitigating the budgetary issues that we are concerned about. For this to work, the money must be deposited in the MP's account soon after registration to Parliament. Honorable Speaker, sir, distinguished delegates, we cannot achieve our wildest dreams by remaining who we are. This is John C. Maxwell. And we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. Proverbs 16, verse 9. I therefore thank you, Tinotenda Siabonga, Twalumba.
A round of applause for Honorable Mona for that presentation. We are joined by Dr. Mangunja, the governor of the Reserve Bank, because in terms of response, they need to share the platform with the Minister of Finance, Professor Ncube. Honorable Mona, thank you very much for the report through consultations to the people. And the people have spoken, and they need to see us implement. I think that was the bottom line in terms of what they were saying. You have heard from us. What is going to happen? Are you going to implement? Honorable Speaker said, you and me and all the honorable members here, we have got a great deal to do. Without wasting much of your time, may I call upon Honorable Molokeli, who will do the presentations first, I propose. And then we will have responses. So to those who have been touched, because I know Honorable Mona's presentation touched on everybody. Imagine up to sanitary wear. Thank you very much. So keep your questions and comments. We'll come to that segment. Honorable Molokele, you have the floor, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Matabele North. Welcome to Matabele North. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to speak on behalf of the
Order,
committee.
honorable members, can we have one meeting? Please.
Ndinoligani yacho kazi. Ini ndinoligani yacho ka. Okay. Okay. And the
Hello, honorable members. A very good afternoon to you. We are all honorable members, isn't it? Honorable Chinotimba. My apologies, honorable members. Can we proceed? Or else I'll seek the protection of this honorable speaker. Honorable Speaker, I seek your guidance and protection.
The way you have been making noise is stuck with your noise. That's what I said. Who's the one and the watch is still Hey. Can you apologize to the house?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, as per the instructions, I withdraw the statement and I apologize. Okay. Welcome again to Matebele North. Mr. Speaker, sir, Madam President, and all protocol observed. I'm going to speak on behalf of the Committee for the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development. I think for me and the committee, the most important message that we need to drive home, not just to this meeting today, but to the country, is that this ministry represents the biggest chance that Zimbabwe has got in terms of taking our country forward, socio-economically speaking. We are talking about going off the grid. What it means is that the ministry has adopted a new policy thrust where it is talking about moving beyond education 3.0 to education 5.0, where we're talking about the ministry emphasizing more on the aspect of science and technology, where we don't just have education for the sake of having education, but education that speaks to the development agenda of this country. So this ministry has already started moving forward in terms of implementation of Education 5.0. And when we talk about going off the grid, we're talking about this ministry not annually going to Treasury to request for funding into a bottomless pit. We're talking about this ministry going to Treasury to look for seed funding, what we can call in business language investment funding. Because when we talk about Education 5.0, we're not just talking about government funding this ministry. We're talking about this ministry providing the impetus, providing the catalysts for economic and social transformation of this country. So, the ministry itself, as you might be aware, it covers several departments and also covers institutions for higher learning, 21 state universities, 13 polytechnics, is it 18? 13 non-state and teacher training colleges and other non-statutory bodies such as the National Biotechnology Authority and Verify Engineering. Some of you might be aware that since this new committee took over, we've been very emphatic in terms of frontlining and putting in the front page the National Biotechnology Authority and Verify Engineering. We've been to Mkwasine, we've been to Mtare at the Feruka Oil Refinery. And when you look at these two institutions, they actually represent and are the very embodiment of what we're talking about when we're talking about this ministry through Education 5.0, representing the best chance that Zimbabwe has got in terms of moving forward, socially, economically speaking. When we talk about Treasury, Honorable Minister of Finance, we are not asking for this ministry to continue to receive food. We wanted to start receiving seeds. 50 kg of mealie meal, you will satisfy yourself today and tomorrow. But 50 kg of seeds, you will have tons and tons of harvest. So today we'll explain how this ministry is very strategic in terms of moving this country forward. We have been touring as a committee for the last 3 weeks, institutions for higher learning. We've been to polytechnics, we've been to teachers' college, we've been to universities. And in line with the vision represented by Education 5.0, we've managed to talk to the principals and vice chancellors. We've inspired them in terms of how they are strategically positioned. And I will try to explain in this meeting. The radical transformation that the ministry is going through, where we stop emphasizing on just, there are three, it's called Education 3.0, where we stop emphasizing just on teaching and research and community service. But we are now adding the fourth and fifth component, where we talk about innovation and industrialization, where we also talk about commercialization. And these institutions for higher learning are strategically positioned. For example, when we were at Harare Polytechnic, we were given water, written polyaqua. We were given water, this bottle water, written polyaqua, produced by the relevant department at Harare Polytechnic. And we said, this is exactly what Education 5.0 means. Because if you go to Pick and Pay, to OK, to Choppies, and so forth, you will not find a single bottle of polyaqua. But if polyaqua were to be upgraded into a proper standardized product, it will mean that we will have a fair chance of import substitution. It will mean that Harare Polytechnic, instead of going back to the ministry, instead of the ministry going back to Treasury every year, Harare Polytechnic will just need investment fund, investment capital, to produce millions of these water bottles. So that if you go across Zimbabwe, and even international, you will find a company that is owned by Harare Polytechnic selling this water. Sorry about that. Selling this water. And what it will mean is that we will reduce, because if you go into Zimbabwean supermarkets, you will find imported water, bottled water. So why would Zimbabwe continue to buy water from South Africa when Harare Polytechnic can produce that water? So that's the direction we're going when we're talking about Education 5.0. So Harare Polytechnic, instead of requesting for funding, they are now requesting for seed investment capital, so that some of their products from their different departments, including those who are doing that bottled water, they create companies that are going to sell the water in such a way that over a period of time, they stop requesting funding from the ministry. They stop requesting funding from Treasury. They start to borrow funding to the fiscus. They start to borrow funding to the Treasury. That's the revolution we're talking about. We're talking about this. If you go to Harare Institute of Science and Technology, they already have companies. We're saying once they get funding, investment capital, they will go off the grid. They will not ask for money from the ministry, and the ministry will stop asking for money from the Treasury. Instead, they will fund themselves. They will start even paying the incentives for the staff and non-academic staff. That is the direction we're going. We are also saying, if you go to Bulawayo, the industrial and commercial hub, where there is now a museum of commerce and industry, factories have closed down. If you go to Southerton in Harare, factories have closed down. We are saying these institutions for higher learning, using the principle of Education 5.0, we are even talking about innovation hubs. We are even talking about incubation and going beyond incubation into commercialization and industrialization. We are saying they should actually go there and take over. Their students, they should only learn in workshops, only in first year. In second, third, fourth year, they should actually take over those companies and provide the inventors for Zimbabwe to revive its commerce and industry. That is the direction that we are going. Okay, so that is the basic concept that we are trying to explain. If you go to the ministry today, most of the funding is going mostly to administrative things. And we are saying, unless and until we move further beyond admin into the science and technology component, we'll continue going around in circles. And that is the direction that we are requesting the minister. The message is going off the grid in terms of funding. That is the message. Okay. And that also speaks to the issues around the skills audit that Zimche helped us. If you look at the critical skills that the country is having a shortage of, in engineering and technology, in natural and applied sciences, in agriculture, in medical and health sciences. We've had a massive brain drain in the last 25 years. We've got millions of Zimbabweans displaced and living outside the country. We've also seen a massive deindustrialization, decommercialization. We have seen an increase in the last 2 decades of import, and less export. That's why the country is going through a foreign currency crisis. Productivity has sunk to an all-time low. We are saying through this audit report in terms of critical skills, the colleges are now realigning. The institutions for higher learning in this country are now realigning in terms of Education 5.0 to start speaking to the critical needs in terms of skills in this country. We need to stop just producing graduates to increase graduate unemployment. We need to start producing graduates who produce more employment for this country. So, what we want to see is the shift where this ministry is just seen as a ministry that just receives funding. We want to see a shift in which this ministry is seen. If you go to the developed countries, they invest more a lot. They invest more in science and technology. They invest more in research and development. And here in Africa, Zimbabwe is one of those countries that has committed itself to invest at least 1% of its GDP to fund research and development. And this has not been happening. And we are kindly insisting that for Zimbabwe to move forward, the least we can do is to invest at least that 1%. That's one of the key us to say, invest that 1% now. And then, because of time, let me skip a bit, looking at the budget's allocation for the ministry, because this is one of the ministries that gets least funding. So, which is very sad for Zimbabwe, because it should be one of the ministries that gets a lot of funding, because most of that funding will be to incentivize our economy and to help us reindustrialize and recommercialize. I was speaking to the minister, and he was talking about ideally $4 to $6 billion. But the actual money that they are going to get, you don't want to listen to this one. It's actually sad, to say the least. Anyway, for now, if you go to the budget for this year, in terms of last year, rather, the ministry had requested 927 million, and they actually got 382 million, with a variance of about 439 million. They did get a supplementary budget of 107 million. All in all, they got about 490 million. So, in terms of the actual request and the actual money dispersed, it was less than 50%. And this is something that is very sad, because what then happened was that the ministry was forced to focus more on funding the administrative part of the component. And where it matters most, where the ministry is very relevant to this country, is the science and technology component, as represented by the shift around Education 5.0. And this is what we're requesting this year, that there be a shift, investment funding for this ministry, seed funding for this ministry, to push Zimbabwe forward socially, economically, and commercially and industrially speaking. I'll skip some of the slides because of time. I want to talk about the revenue sources of the ministry, which is where our shift is, to say that most of the income that the ministry needs, especially through the institutions for higher learning, they actually do not need it from Treasury. They just need seed funding, and then on their own, they are able to do and produce, and then at the same time, get off the grid. So at the moment, most of the, if you look at the page, most of the money is coming through payment of fees and so on and so on. But what we are saying is, let most of the money come through the commercial and industrial component. Anyway, let me proceed. We did some key observations as a committee. And one of the key flagships around Education 5.0 is that investment into what we call innovation hubs. We as a country now have about 6 innovation hubs One is found at the University of Zimbabwe, at the Midland State University, National University of Science and Technology, Chino University of Technology. We also, I have other two in the other institutions for higher learning, but those are the ones that are like almost at the completion stage. And the idea behind the innovation hubs is to allow those who have got ideas around commercial and industrialization, around innovation and so on, to say, we are giving you that space for you to actually develop those ideas, incubate those ideas, and beyond that, escalate them and feed into the social economic thrust of the country and create catalysts for the development of this country. So there's been funding. In the last year or two, there's been progress, but most of them are still at the level of infrastructure, the innovation hubs. So we would need more funding in terms of the actual shift towards incubation and innovation. So we need infrastructural support for the innovation hubs. Let me observe also other key successes that we picked up as a committee. The ministry, in the difficult circumstances that the country is finding itself in, they introduced a student loan scheme in partnership with CBZ, where there was about $30 million guaranteed by the minister of about 15 million. Unfortunately, our initial impression is that most of the students have not been able to access this loan facility due to various reasons, but that's something that is a work in progress. And the ministry has got a vision to ensure that each province in this country has got a teacher's college, a polytechnic, and a university. And Matabele North, as you might know, is one of the most marginalized provinces of the country, historically and presently. We managed recently to have Lopana State University, and now, this year, we've now got a teacher's college in Wange Central constituency, which is one of the good news, under the support of the UCE in Bulawayo. And that is a step in the right direction. And we want to encourage the Minister of Finance not to feel compromised, because he is also from Matabele North, not to feel compromised. Don't feel compromised, my brother. Agunkwalea pandela enye. Agunkwalea pandela enye. Yes, and the ministry has been shifting as part of the strategy to go off the grid, working more with the private sector in terms of infrastructural development, working more with private companies, and they've done some MOUs, it's work in progress. They've also been developing designs of inclusive modern university towns, which is something we really appreciate as a committee. And some of the issues that they launched during the past year is the higher education infrastructure investment, Zimbabwe National Geospatial Space Agency, and they did the National Critical Skills Audit. And also they launched the National Qualifications Framework. They are working through ZIMCHE, which is Zimbabwe Council for Higher Education, one of the most strategic institutions in this country at the moment, and one of the most underfunded. So would really be very, 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 very humble and say, can you take a second look at ZIMCHE, because they are strategic in terms of the skills and the qualifications that we have in this country. And it speaks to unemployment and employment in this country. Anyway, there were some issues that they met, some the challenges that they faced, and some targets that they failed to meet. I think some of them we want to highlight. In terms of promotion of research and development, which is a very critical component for this ministry, the government has once again failed, in our understanding, to honor its 1% commitment towards research and development. So please, we're appealing again, if you invest 1% in research and development, it will provide this country a chance in terms of moving forward from a science and technology point of view. Also, they've been investing more in terms of strengthening science and learning science learning and industrial training. But we see that in the colleges, especially in the polytechnics, the engineering faculties and other technical faculties are having a lot of obsolete equipment, and there's need to invest more there. And then also in terms of infrastructure development, where the ministry has been pushing for public-private partnerships, engaging the private sector, we see there is a need for shift. We are not asking for money from the treasury, we are asking for investment, capital support, and guarantees. Because if you look at NAST, for example, NAST is one of the biggest tragedies of this country. The university is almost 30 years old. It currently accommodates less than 2% of its students on campus. That means 146 rooms. So this is one of the tragedies. And we are saying NAST should actually get support in terms of working with the private sector to ensure that there's a massive increase of accommodation. And that's where the treasury comes in. Not to just put money there, but to support the engagement of the private sector so that we have a situation whereby we don't need to come back to treasury next year. Also, we have investment in energy and mineral research. As I said earlier on, our committee is a new committee, but it's been very outgoing. We've gone to Feruka, we've gone to Mkwasine, where we've seen what Verify Engineering is doing. Verify Engineering is one of the least known companies in this country, but it's a visionary company. It's a company that if we focus on as Zimbabwe, it could prove to our big advantage. There is a lot of potential that lies with Verify Engineering in terms of energy and mineral research, in terms of import substitution, in terms of beneficiation. There are a lot of things that we are buying, like fuel, like gas. You know that, that gas that they use in hospitals from bulk and so on. That's a monopoly, and Verify Engineering is the potential to help there and reduce that monopoly from a foreign company. We also have potential in terms of ammonium nitrate, in terms of intervening in agriculture and fertilizer production, also in terms of energy production, in terms of thermal power in Mkwasine there. They have the potential of a power station as Verify Engineering that can actually reduce some of the pressure on the southern grid. Some of the challenges that they've been encountering, they are mostly related to the shift in terms of the macroeconomic policy, in terms of the monetary and fiscal policies, and that has had an adverse effect. Mr. Speaker, Madam President, if there is anything that can be used as an example of the adverse effect of the policy shift, is the institutions of higher learning. We're at Bulawayo Polytechnic recently. What we learned is that Bulawayo Polytechnic, in response to the hyperinflation and the rising costs of pricing, they have actually removed breakfast from their diet. If you go to Bulawayo Polytechnic today, they no longer serve breakfast. This is one of the biggest tragedies of our time. They have removed all types of nutritional foods. Lunch is only cabbage and beans, worse than a normal boarding school in Zimbabwe. Meat is no longer available as an option. So we're saying to these colleges, they need investment capital because they can have their own workshops, they can have their own companies, they can have their own farms where they can produce that food. And they need support, even from the Ministry of Agriculture. We hear there is a land audit. These institutions for higher learning, please give them consideration in terms of farms so that they can produce and go off the grid. Instead of buying food, they should produce the food and produce the new farmers that we need as Zimbabwe. New commercial farmers that we need as Zimbabwe. In terms of key uncertainties, I think we have highlighted the adverse impact of the macroeconomic policy shift, the changes that we had recently in terms of the monetary policy and fiscal policy. But it has caused havoc in colleges. It's compromising the quality of education. Remember that this committee is doing a report in terms of quality assurance in institutions for higher learning, and that's one of the key issues that is coming out. And we are losing a lot of staff, skilled personnel in institutions for higher learning because of this shift, adverse shift. And then in terms of the ministry's scenario game board, this is where we are. Education 5.0, promoting critical skills. Industry 4.0, promoting high graduate employment. And the adverse situation where we are right now, education 3.0, where we're shifting from, where we've got critical skills deficit and also high graduate unemployment. So that's the ideal situation where we want to move. Okay, because of time, I need to shift fast and sit down. In terms of the ministry's key priorities for the 2020 budget, the ministry's ideal budget is about 1.7 billion. And then Treasury has put an expenditure ceiling of about 852 million, which is 49% of the ideal budget. So there is a variance of about 51%. So it's going to adversely affect the ministry once again. Compared to the previous financial year, we are going through the same cycle, but we are saying let's shift the discussion to investment capital support. And then as a committee, we are recommending some of the strategic goals that needs to be pursued by this ministry in 2020, and we need support from Treasury in terms of investment in energy and mineral research, especially represented by the National Biotechnology Authority and Verify Engineering. Last week, we attended an international workshop in terms of biotechnology and biosafety and so on, where we're talking about the food security in this country. Can you imagine how much food we're importing in Zimbabwe today? We used to be the breadbasket of the region. And people were also saying, why is this committee talking about GMOs and so on? And we said, this discussion needs to be contextualized. Most of the food that we're importing, are we not questioning the GMOs factor in those food, especially from South Africa? Because some of the countries that we're buying food from are actually already focusing on GMOs. Also, a key priority around innovation hubs and the industrial parks, because we don't want to just have incubation, we want to move to commercialization and industrialization. Also focus on the R&D, research and development, that 1% to focus on research and innovation. Infrastructure development, especially around new technologies in institutions for learning and accommodation for students. And then further investment in agriculture. I know that we've been talking about command agriculture and now we've shifted to smart agriculture. When we're talking about smart agriculture, we need to invest more in agricultural research. We need to invest more in the institutions of our learning that are focusing on agriculture. Let's strategically position them so that they bring value to this nation. Biotechnology, that's another low-hanging fruit, especially we went to Chino University where they're talking about artificial insemination. You know, we have to replenish our national health. And there is an opportunity. If we invest capital there to support Chino University, we will be able to go a long way in terms of replenishing our national health. So these are practical things that can be done by this ministry through the institutions for our learning, such as Chino University. They are ready, they just need investment capital. Not money that will be asked again next year, but money for them to start their own initiatives and support the nation and at the same time create profit for themselves. I think the summary of the bids, as you can see, ideal budget in terms of the 3 critical programs that the ministry has got. That's what we have, and the key priorities. Just to highlight that National Biotechnology Authority, we've been working with them, and as members of parliament, we'll be working with you in the near future to just have more debate so that we appreciate the low-hanging fruit that it is. Together with Verify Engineering, we've been very supportive of them. And we know that if we start to support the research and innovation that we saw there, the country will benefit. Okay, I'm skipping. Okay, I'm going to skip and finish with the committee's recommendations. So as a committee, we are recommending that the government should honor its commitment to invest about 1%, at least 1% of the country's GDP towards research and development. I've said this point several times. There is also a strong need to support Verify Engineering projects since they present a low-hanging fruit for the country's development. I think this point also equally applies to institutions such as National Biotechnology Authority and ZimChe. Also, the universities are feeling isolated right now in terms of infrastructural capacity, in terms of administrative capacity. So there is need for an intervention from the ministry at the moment. This is a discussion that can be carried beyond this meeting. But we saw it as a committee when we were touring the institutions that there's a lot that is happening that needs to be addressed urgently. Otherwise, we will not have anything to write home about in terms of institutions for our learning. There is also a need to come up with a framework to harness public-private partnerships, since most of them are specifically targeting established universities, but they should target all institutions for higher learning. The ministry should work with local authorities and identify land on which to construct student cities in order to ease accommodation challenges. So we're saying to the local authorities, to the city councils, instead of having students scattered all over the cities and towns, let us allocate a specific area where we can develop student cities. If you go to Johannesburg today, for example, if you go to Braamfontein, you will see that in the last 15 years, Braamfontein has been transformed from being a ghost town into a thriving, full of life, hub for students. Students from different institutions for higher learning are there, and the big brands are now at Braamfontein. And this is what you want to see. If you go to Bulawayo, if you go to Harare and so on, you want to go to some parts of Harare where students from all institutions of higher learning are interacting together there and supported. And the issue around 5.0 means that we should invest more in terms of commercialization and industrialization so that we can go off the grid. I've said that point. And then also another issue that is of big concern, there's a big disparity between salaries of college lecturers and the university lecturers. So that is something that is being addressed, but we pray that it goes to its logical conclusion. In terms of blanket approach to employment freeze, there is an institution for higher learning that is more than 50% vacancy rates. And it's something that we discovered during our national outreach. And we feel government should start to unfreeze some of the strategic positions because our institutions for higher learning are suffering at the moment. And there should be a special exemption for science and technology disciplines. The ministry's budget system and resource allocation should reflect the new ministry's philosophy around Education 5.0. This is a message to say that that component of science and technology needs to be upped. That component of science and technology. Because once we invest there, we will use the institutions of higher learning to take the leadership in terms of reviving our industry and our commerce. As Zimbabwe, we cannot cry that we are poor. God has blessed us a lot. We're one of the richest countries in the world. All we need to do is to manage our resources well. And we can use institutions for higher learning as one of the key strategic partners for developing this country, for taking this country forward. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Molokele. A round of applause for our honorable member. Thank you very much. Let me thank Honorable Molokele for that presentation. What I've picked from his presentation, that we can move away from the sorry state of affairs in our institutions of higher learning to achieve and to have success stories. And while Leslie was winding up, I also thought, okay, there are problems in the institutions. And most problems that he has actually picked on, like the diet, like the accommodation, I put the girl child in front of me. And I said, that's where the Madalas go there to pick these girls during the night so that she can have a decent meal. Because beans and cabbage, honestly, are not part of what we would want our children to consume on a daily basis. We need to do something, Honorable Speaker. So thank you, Honorable Molokele, for that presentation. Let me now call upon Professor Ncube, our Minister of Finance, to respond to the issues that have been raised in the committee report on budget and finance. I know it was a mouthful, and I would want to believe that the governor whispered to me that he left off some of what he wanted to respond to with the minister because he has had to rush back and he had a flight to catch. So he has given his apologies and I've actually allowed it. And I hope and trust that it is well with you as well. Honorable Minister. Sir.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll respond from here. Let me really thank Honorable Mona for the report that he gave from the Committee Finance and Budget regarding their feelings about what the budget should look like going forward, but also what does the current budget look like. I really appreciate, and I must say that there is complete overlap and agreement between what the committee feels and how certainly I feel and how we should proceed going forward. Maybe let me tackle one or a few things. I know that I have 30 minutes, but if I do it in 20 minutes, I'll get a prize. So I better speed up. And I liked your diagram, Mona, where you show the quadrants. And the best quadrants to be in is where we have price stability and confidence. Let's drive in that direction. So I agree with that kind of thinking. Then you talked about the need to really target the agriculture, health, education, the more socially oriented sectors. Again, I agree with you. I actually remarked the same that, we need to reach some of these international targets, but we should target budget specifically. If you look at health and education, it's about the personnel in those two sectors. It's about the infrastructure, but it's about also the right public-private partnerships to make sure that we can partner with the private sector. I'm happy to report that when it comes to agriculture, you mentioned the Maputo Declaration, which said that at least 10% of the budget should be on agriculture. Actually, we have more than exceeded the Maputo Declaration. In the supplementary budget, thank you to you members here, you approved a budget of agriculture which is at $4.7 billion, which is 27.3% of the entire budget, well above the Maputo Declaration. And then for health, the target, the Abuja target is 15%, because you highlighted those two. But we're still short on the health sector. In the budget, we approved 7.5%, which is basically half. So we're halfway there. We will make progress, and we're amenable to that. There's an interesting point you made. It's also in your recommendations about the need to subsidize inputs under smart agriculture. It certainly tickled me the right way. I think this is something we should reflect on. But if I say too much, the officials will say, Minister, you just committed us. So, but you can feel that I'm feeling something here, that for us to get the farmers back to the land, they need affordable inputs. We've provided affordable capital, but now you're talking inputs. On livestock, Honorable Mona, you are right. Those pictures were harrowing, the cattle dying and all, they were really harrowing. I must say that we agree with you. On 2 days ago, or on Tuesday, we allocated, we found 2 million US dollars in terms of forex that is going to be applied in acquiring dipping chemicals and vaccines to deal with this issue. This is this week, so we're doing something. The Minister of Agriculture has told us a global figure that we need to target, work towards. We'll get there. But we're alive to this issue. We have lost a lot of cattle. We have to move fast due to the general disease and other and ticks and so forth. But I'm also told that Complex can manufacture dipping chemicals. So that's something to look at, so that if we can import substitute, that's also a better way forward. So we're looking into all of that. But vaccines for now, we have to import. I think we're importing from Botswana. Minister Shirandi Ndizo, we're importing from Botswana. Yeah, so we have to pay our friends next door to give us vaccines, but that's what it is. Commodity exchange establishment, I'm completely sold. In fact, I always say that the best commodity exchange that will work in a developing country like Zimbabwe is the version that you find in Ethiopia. And I've told it works. And it works with rural infrastructure for deliveries, with delivery people for the goods. The trading flow in the city center in Addis Ababa is linked to the Chicago Commodity Exchange. I had the privilege to go and ring the bell to start the auctioning of coffee in Ethiopia, so I know it very well. And I know it will work in Zimbabwe. The advantage is that in Zimbabwe, we already have the silos that in Ethiopia they had to build in the areas. We've got the GMB infrastructure that could cohabit with the exchange infrastructure. So we've an idea. We have no shortage of IT people that will come up with the systems and software to make everything work. It's an issue of decision making and the will from us to really move forward. We will. Following up on the forensic audit issues in agriculture, wherever we are, look at what we've done. In the new model of smart agriculture, everything is on the table. That is a good start. That is, we budgeted for it, it's on the table. We're working with the private sector, it's on the table. The bank's own auditors will also audit, and those audits are public. If you take a CPZ, which is listed on the exchange, its audited accounts are public documents, so we'll be able to see as well what's happening. So there's a higher level of transparency, and there will be a higher level of targeting, and also a higher level of access, because it's a bank, and the other banks also involved. That's out there. You can access it from different points. You highlighted the issue of investing in irrigation, DDF, Agritech. I agree with you. We need to evacuate that water from the 10,000 dams that we have. DDF, you did a good thing. Remember what you did to me in the afternoon, one afternoon when we were doing supplementary budget. I can't remember who it was who said, Minister, we need more budget for DDF. And in one afternoon, we just shifted 100 million of the supplementary budget to DDF, of which 40 million is going towards borehole drilling, and also then the remainder has been focusing on lending strips and other infrastructure. So I think it's fair to say DDF has been well supported this budget year, but of course we have to carry on. We need water security in the rural areas. In fact, I know one issue that is a problem is the drilling equipment. Minister Shiri is better than me at articulating this. Is the drilling equipment which is in short supply for the very, very dry areas where you have to go very, very deep. Where we have got some equipment that is in short supply there. But also I think the incentives we've been using to even reward those who are the contractors who are doing the shallower drilling, which is based on the wet borehole concept, as opposed to just a borehole, because it means that if you don't hit any water, you don't get paid. So why would they go to a dry area and drill when they know they won't get paid because they won't find water easily? That's what is going on. I know there was a contractor who was in Matopo district. I've been watching the Matopo district. I'm not going to stand there in 2023. Don't worry, whoever is from Matopo district. But I've been watching it. It's dry. So the contractor actually, I know the contractor. He had to leave the area because of this payment in terms of dry ball only, and go to Chimanimane where they could drill, they could get to water. That's how they are paid by the Chinese government, and they're Chinese. So there are those issues to work through. The administrative will sort it out. A mining sector, you did very well. Minister Chitando are really working to deal with the fiscal regime around the mining sector, the issues around mining. We were dealing with that. We want a $12 billion industry. We're determined to get there. Yeah, so I can only agree with you. You raise the issue of the London bullion market. Here, maybe the governor could have said a bit more, but this is our aspiration. We dropped out of it because we reached the threshold, we kicked out, but I think we've worked our way there, and we should aspire to get there. And also signing up with EITI, the transparency issues, these are critical. I'm sure Minister of Mines can evaluate. We'll also respond to it when they speak tomorrow. The 2% tax, I agree. Let's ring-fence it. We've tried to do that already. So a lot of what we see as spending on social infrastructure, health education, plus social protection, some roads, is fitting off the 2% tax. So we've kind of done that already within Treasury. That's why also when we report, when Zimra reports, it's a collection account in terms of revenue collection. They have a line that says 2% tax, so that we know how much it is that we're collecting, and then we can allocate and apply. Have I done 20 minutes?
No, not yet. Yeah. Can we have some kind of order, honorable members? I hear a lot of whispers and discussions and laughs. You can kindly recuse yourself if you need to do a quick discussion or consultation amongst yourselves, so that it doesn't interfere with the listening capacity of others. Thank you. Sorry, Minister, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've heard you well when you say that while we can do this ring fence, but also we need to make sure that Zimra is adequately funded. I agree with you. We'll examine the retention levels and see if they can be given more resources. We'll do that. It's very important. NCDs, this is an important issue. You know, those of you who are in the health sector, you know, cancer is a comorbidity with HIV, right? So it's there, whether like it or not, because of HIV, but it's also there in its own right as an NCD. And NCDs are the fastest growing disease group in the health sector. It's very, very serious. In fact, it's even fair to say where HIV treatment has succeeded, HIV has almost become an NCD because you're able to carry on with your life and so forth, and you control it with drugs. So it's a very big issue. So I listened very carefully when you talked about this idea of a cancer levy, cancer fund. Cancer hospital should be a no-brainer. Now, let me tell you what I really think. That Egusileni Hospital in Bulawayo should be turned into a cancer hospital, period. Period. Specialist cancer. Let's not even think. We're wasting too much time thinking. It's there, it's been lying fallow. Let's just do that. So allow me to put a budget line for health, for a cancer hospital called Egusileni Cancer Hospital. So give me a budget. I'll just insert as you just instruct me. Now, you talk about the cancer levy, though, the levy component. You know what my thinking is, Honorable Mona? We already have a health levy. You see, if you listen to the international conversation on health funding, and I tell you, I listened very carefully because one of the things I used to do before I joined government was to actually doing what you call developing strategies for sustainable financing of the health sector, working with the Global Fund in Geneva. I think another idea could be to look at the health levy so that it covers the NCD space, including cancer. Maybe not to really launch a new fund, but to transform that. That's my kind of immediate gut reaction, but you may be right. Maybe we need a special fund, but one needs to reflect on that. But NCDs, cancer is a big issue. You also observe that the national insurance issue is dead. I don't think that's the feeling yet from the Minister of Health and the Minister of Health. I think he still wants to progress that conversation to its logical conclusion. Maybe let's not kill it too quickly. I'll tell you why. You see, when you have got a national insurance scheme like this, and then you request citizens to pay an insurance premium to access the services, is small. There's an idea that we could use, which is to get some donors to subsidize the insurance premium for the vulnerable groups. So we could enter into smart relationships with donors around the construction of this national insurance scheme. Let's give it some life. Let's just give it some bit of life and interrogate it further before we kill it. On sanitary ware, I'm fully agreed we should remove all taxes, all impediments right across the spectrum of all sanitary ware. Agreed. I must admit, though, there was an issue. It was raised to me by Mrs. Hairabwi, one of the honorable MPs here, so I gave authorization for certain sanitary ware to be brought in duty-free, remove the taxes, but we did not issue an SI. So when it came to implementation, he said, but Minister, where is the SI? Okay. So I told her, we'll fix it. But look, that was just an oversight. So there's no debate here, simple. Family planning resources, in terms of education and so forth, all this is very, very good, certainly. Free education in line with the Constitution, BEAM needs. I think let's try to get BEAM to work before we get to the full free primary education. It's a process. Give us time. I think we'll get there. 50% of 2% for primary education will ring fence. I think so. An important issue is R&D funding. I'm completely sold. I'm sold. We need to increase the budget for R&D funding, agreed. And then this equalization fund for rural infrastructure. Again, I'm agreed to this. In fact, I particularly like the word equalization in it to make sure that we improve the inclusiveness of the education sector services. TVET, this is very critical. My brother is up here, Murura. There's a lot to learn. Of course, we could have a Zimbabwe model, but I still feel there's a lot to learn from the Swiss and the Germans on how to run effective TVET programs. In fact, if we replicate what we used to do before, which is actually still very good, now we will still make a progress, but there's something to learn from the Swiss and the Germans on how you manage TVET. In fact, in Switzerland, 80% of the students at university go through TVET education. So they work, a 16-year-old is already earning 2,000 Swiss francs, a month, 16-year-old, just after O-level. So they have to skip A-level, so their A-level is at work. And then while they're at work, they then start a degree. After 4 years working and back to school working, they end up with a degree. 80% of students prefer that route because they love the fact that they get paid salaries at the age of 16. So it's a fantastic incentive. Water and sanitation, more balls, agreed. Dams, agreed. Urban water and sanitation, agreed. In fact, the intervention that we've done, City of Harare, everywhere, is really important for us to do that. And we need more budget from you to assist our urban areas, but also to direct the devolution budget towards
Order,
that.
members.
That's an easy one there. And I agree with you on this one. SMEs, the largest employers, I agree. Zimra funding, I'm rushing because I know I have 20 minutes, otherwise I'll lose my prize. Then on the Auditor General's recommendations, at the risk of repeating, in paragraph, if you go to the supplementary budget that we presented and you approved, paragraph 201 on page 64, I talk about strengthening the internal controls of government within, obviously through Treasury and so forth, in response to the Auditor General's recommendations. So we're implementing that, we're responding to it, and we have raised it here, we're doing something about it. I'll be happy to report how that is going. It's critical. We need less mishaps in how our finances are managed within government. Right? But also you said we should report to Parliament and so forth. I thought just also by presenting that statement, one was in a sense reporting on progress that we're making to meeting the requirements and the recommendations of the Auditor General. I'm running. I'm looking for something new. No. You mentioned something about making the Reserve Bank more independent. I'm all for that. That's why I said the first order of business, Treasury, stop borrowing from RBZ. It's not your bank. It's not a cash box. If you want money, issue Treasury bills. Have a process in place, and there's a robust process in place now. So that has been the first order of business. Second order of business, we need a monetary policy committee which is not run by the government. It's independent to do that. So that process of creating independence has begun. You mentioned the issue of separating governor from chair. All that is a process, but very few central banks in the world separate those two, by the way, I must say that. In Kenya, there's a separate chairperson from governor of the board, separate chairperson of the monetary policy from governor. Same in Rwanda, just to give examples, but there are not many examples. Yes, we may move in that direction one day, but there are not many examples where this has been done. Communicating macro policies better, I couldn't agree with you more. I have acted, our chief director please stand up, for communication policy. In my front office, Clive Mpambela is there. I'm happy to report we've hired an individual to assist us with some communication challenges that we've faced in the past. Issuance of treasury bills, this works now. This works with a system, it works. This advertised, RBZ acts as our agent, and we're the only ones who can issue treasury bills, really, as central government. and they act on our behalf is going well. It's really going well. In fact, I've been surprised, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mona, Honorable Mona, that the auction of treasury bills, which I thought was going to be very difficult in an environment of high inflation, has actually worked. And we're able to auction these T-bills and get a rates of the order of 19, 20%, 15%. It's remarkable. It's been so successful, in our view, under a tough environment. And then on the parliamentary budget, which is the last issue, yes, we agreed in the standing committee for Parliament. And yesterday we had another meeting that really Treasury must make sure that there's a 3 month cover in terms of the budget for Parliament, so that you only go to Treasury once every 3 months at most, and that's it. So we really need to enforce this in terms of the implementation of the budget implementation for Parliament. Yeah, let me stop here for now. Thank you. I think I lost my prize of 20 minutes.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, for the response. And I will not attempt to summarize anything. I know that I will go into plenary where we can then unpack and match on whether the responses do match the presentations and the queries. Thank you. I now move on to Honourable Professor Murwira on the responses to the presentation made by Honourable Molokele.
Thank you, Chair, Honorable Chair, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Madam President of Senate, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Members who are all here. I am very humbled to do my response to my Chair of the Portfolio Committee on Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development. We are supported very well by our committee, and we don't take that for granted. What he has actually said is as if he is in institutions every day, and the strategy is I agree with all what he said, but I will just be specific on issues. Actually, as a ministry, we are convinced by certain principles that industry does not fall from the sky. Somebody must cause it. And it's nowhere else where it can be caused except mumatare nyika dzacho, in the intervals of that country. And matare amazwano zvikoro, which is the institutions of higher and tertiary education. That's where we teach people skills and knowledge so that they can cause something. Industry that we see in this country, and people normally say, oh, Bulawayo used to have industry, whatever. Zisco fell. Yes, it fell because you did not design it. Somebody did design it from elsewhere, and you were just workers there. So when it fell, you couldn't do anything about it. We couldn't do anything about it because the issue is our institutions do not teach designing of things from scratch to something. So this is our guiding principle to say industry does not fall from the sky. It must come from the higher and tertiary education system. So I agree with Chair. So honorable members, we are saying basically, in order to arrive, we must walk. The tragedy that we normally have in our countries, including ours, is the paradox is that most people want to arrive, but nobody wants to walk. So how will we arrive? So we walk through our design, we walk through our budget, and I think that's what my chair was saying. So for the first time in the history of the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, we produced a strategic plan, which we have, and I think we shared it with our committee. And this plan is the one which is outlaying how we are going to use our higher and tertiary education institutions to move Zimbabwe to the next level. That level where we make our own things, where we share knowledge at the highest level with anyone from anywhere, working with anyone from anywhere that want to work with us, but we dictate the pace based on our objectives. So what we are saying basically is that we must act as if we answer and only answer to, one, our ancestors, two, our children and the unborn. Once we take that approach, our education will be correct. This country was built in complex stoneworks like Kami, like Gogyo, like Great Zimbabwe, like what? So people were doing things. And normally when we say, what does it mean to lose a war? We lost the war in 1890. And when you lose it, you lose your food, you lose your buildings, you lose your name, you lose almost everything. So you can't use the same institution that made you lose all those things to gain them. It's not possible. For us, we say for Zimbabwe to rise, our design and the standard of our higher and tertiary education system must be world class. That's what the committee is demanding. We are focusing on developing this country using all effort that we can using the education system. And our main enemy is number one, is ignorance. Somebody called Nikola Tesla said, of all the frictional resistances, the one that most retards human movement is ignorance. So that's what we are fighting with the education system. We were asked, the last year when we were in Bulawayo, the committee said we will be watching you, and that's our main issue. The first thing that we did was then the National Critical Skills Audit that the chairman showed, which shows us that, of course, we have got a literacy rate of 94%. But literacy, you must know, is reading and writing. It's not talking about thinking. It's talking about reading and writing. You can read and write, but are you thinking about what you're writing and what you are reading? So that is the next stage, which is critical, which Education 5.0 is trying to address. So when we did the national skills audit, you find out that our national skills are at about 38%, which basically means that we can read and write, we can talk, but very little that we can do. So that's what we are addressing using Education 5.0, and we have got very good support from it. But we are not saying literacy is not bad. Literacy is very good. But what we must know is that it's just the first stage. Because reading and writing, without you being able to understand things, will only make you a professor want textbooks, written by a professor in Canada, to say, we like textbooks at university. So do you think they are being written by God? They are being written by somebody who was born of woman. So our education has to move to that level. So our effort is to industrialize using our higher and tertiary education system. There are opportunities in this country. This country does not have enough food. This country exports patients. It does not have enough capacity to heal people with ailments. This country has potholes. So somebody says that Zimbabwe does not have opportunities. It's not true. All what we are saying is that the opportunity is there, but the ability to address that opportunity is not there. So that's why we are redesigning that education. We should remember that good fortune happens when opportunity meets preparation. So the preparation is the skills. So the issue now is that our task is to meet a national strategic intent by doing a national capability enhancement, being able to do things. And we can only do it with a correct design. You know, when you have got a national strategic intent of trying to be rich, we want to be wealthy as a country. That is our national strategic intent. But we have that capability. So we are placing our education on the national capability issue to say, are we able to? Are we able to? Do we have a spear on our national emblem or we have an AK-47? Did you make it? So these are the issues, fundamental, very nasty questions that we have to ask to ourselves. And so we can only do that when we design the education correctly. We are saying, the chair was saying education 5.0 is our way out, and I completely agree. Why? Because an axe is used to cut a tree, and a hammer tree will never cut one. You will stay in the forest. So education 5.0 is a design that departs from an education that teaches, that researches, that just does conferences. Because people are very good at conferences. They say, you know, that's why most of the times they say, what do you do about this? What will you do? What will you do? Everybody's asking somebody, what will you do? What will you do yourself? So we want an education that takes national responsibility within ourselves. So that's why we say education 3.0, we are moving to innovation and industrialization. And innovation and industrialization is the ultimate aim. Because after you have worked a lot, you'd say, oh, yeah, I did this physics, Milankovitch theory, I did all this, but I was telling the president that my mother would do like this. You talk, oh, I know about cumulonimbus, I know about, she will continue doing like this. What she's saying is that, does your education make us eat? All this is what we are trying to do. So in innovation, we are saying we shall harness all good ideas, we shall legally protect them, we shall also market them, we shall technically evaluate them, and on this one, we have been supported, and we have made quite some progress. I think you can show that we have done the innovation hubs. This is the one at UZ, which is complete. This is one at Chinoi, which is complete. That is one at MSU, which is complete. That is the Annex Science Park at MSU, which is complete. And that is the board, you just go. And that is the one at the NAST, which will be commissioned next week by His Excellency the President. So we are saying, and another one, this is the one at HIT. It's almost done now, the Honorable Chair. And I'm sure that before December, we were given the last tranche of 5 million, just to make sure that they get done with it on this side of the year. And yes, that's the one that we are planning to do at the National Defense University. So what we are basically saying is that a country is developed by its own people. The rest can just visit. And if they want to help you, it's okay. We'll work with everybody, but the agenda is ours. We, however, know that for us to have our education working very well, we must make sure that we use a correct philosophy. And the chairman said, Honorable Chair said, is the heritage-based philosophy. What are we saying in our heritage-based philosophy? We are saying you must use resources that you have. Great Zimbabwe, Gogo, Manyanga were built using stone that was around. There's no imported material there. And the medicines were from trees from Zimbabwe. And fruits, a Mtamba tree is a fruit tree. A Marula tree is a fruit tree. A fruit tree is not only apple. Don't force an apple to grow where it should not grow. Most of our agriculture is very expensive because we are trying to force things to grow that don't want to grow. So we end up importing this, importing that machinery, importing this. Do you think you need a boom sprayer for Munga? I don't think so. So all these things are what we are talking about. To say, please, when you do your science, you must know that Mushonga is Muti. It's Muti in Sindebele, it's Muti in Shona. And Muti means medicine comes from trees. Why don't you use your trees for your pharmaceuticals in order to develop your country? So this is the heritage-based philosophy that we are talking about. So we are saying for everything that so heritage does not mean dancing mbube or chongoyo or whatever. That's cultural heritage. We are talking about scientific heritage. We have the plants, we have the soil. If you have got two countries that have got exactly same resources, but they have two different levels of development, look at the brains of its people. That is the difference. Focusing on their heritage, are they focusing on their heritage or not? If you focus on your heritage, you'll do it. So this is what I agree with the chair and will continue. And the issue is also about consciousness, about who are you as a people. First and foremost, If you want your education to work, it must be for your environment. Who are you as a people? No imposter mentality. Who are you? If you know who you are, you will know that stone is okay. You will know that if you are eating dumba, it's okay. You cannot let somebody name a fruit that you were eating over the years, like unkemeswane matamba, and somebody calls it mangi apple. No, it's not for monkeys. Anonzi matamba unkemeswane. So this is what we are talking about when we are talking about heritage-based philosophy. So we have heard how we were eating ndumba nyemba. Somebody comes and calls them cow peas. They are not for cows, they are ours. So that's why Cabinet has actually said no more thing called small grains. It's traditional crops, it's traditional grains, because wheat is a small grain too. Why is it not small? They are calling it small grain because they are saying it's insignificant, but we are saying it's significant. So, what we are also saying, and I agree with the chair, is that we will industrialize this country in our lifetime. If we have the correct philosophy, and we have it, heritage-based industrialization. Kuita kenning ya matamba zokuti vanhu vanodya matamba vakavona moto chaiwo. So that's what we are talking about. Because an apple is a tree, a mtamba is a tree, a marula is a tree, an orange is a tree. Why do you grow crops that were created by God to grow in the temperate regions and you are trying to force them to grow here? They won't do it. So finally, what we are saying is that in our industry shall be based on we grow it, you mine it, or you manufacture it. And these are basically the issues that we are talking about. And I agree with the chair. This is why I'm saying investing in the higher and tertiary education system is not giving people money, is giving people seeds to grow the future. When you look at Silicon Valley was created by Stanford University, period. That's it. So it did not fall from the sky. I want to finish off, Honorable Chair, by saying, I want to quote Booker T. Washington, who said, and I agree, we must not only become reliable, we must not only become progressive, we must not only become skillful, we must not only become intelligent, but we must keep the idea constantly before our youths that all forms of labor, whether by hand or by head, are honorable. This is why we are saying skills and knowledge are important. This is what we want to say in higher and tertiary education, and we really are imploring the House to please consider this for the sake of the future of this country based on its children. Thank you.
A round of applause for the two ministers for the responses. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I know by virtue of those responses, questions and queries might arise. Let me just abuse the opportunity of being the chair. Honorable Minister Ngube, in the morning, you spoke about employment creation. I wondered on whether those jobs would be decent work for both men and women. And when I heard Honorable Molokeli presenting that there is need for seed investment and the example that he gave in terms of bottled water, I was inspired. But lest we forget, always when we create employment, let it be decent work for men, women, and their youth. Thank you. I move on to the most interesting segment of this afternoon's presentation. We now go for comments, questions, supplementary, but with these do's and don'ts rules. One question per person. Let's try to avoid further presentations. As you question or seek for clarification, kindly proffer solutions so that as a way forward, our secretariat will be able to capture solutions for parliamentarians in our way forward. So can I have this bay first? Okay, I can change, that's fine. Yes, that's fine, I'll come to you, don't worry, it's fine. Because in the morning, you remember, we started with this bay and this one. But I'll still come to you, don't worry. Don't worry, I will come to you. So those seated on this bay, please relax. Honorable Njuna there, Honorable Senator Mpofu, I don't see any further requests for the floor. There are two people here. Yes, Honorable Sibanda. So I have three. Any further raise of the hand on this bay, I'm not going to give you the floor. Thank you. Be brief, please. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair. Chair, I've never been elected. However, I've got two issues for the Minister of Finance. I ask for...
One. Thank you.
The Minister of Finance, we have 26 ministries. It is my hope and fervent view that you see reason in establishing a statutory instrument that is going to give them each a gold mine to originate their own budgetary needs from the extractive resource of gold. We have more than 40 gold mines in my constituency, for argument's sake. As you also give the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary also one gold mine. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mpofu.
I'll make it quick. Mine is a comment, and in particular is addressed to the Minister of Finance. As you know, I'm also an economist, an econometrician to be more precise, so I deal with numbers. And in my field, honesty is actually important for confidence, and reliable figures are part of that drive. And because of that, I think it's very important that as a country, we try and ensure that the figures that we post out there to the externals, especially investors, is very accurate. Why do I say that? Today we've been presented with a number of figures, and in particular, I think my concern was on the GDP. The governor of the Reserve Bank pointed out that we currently have a deficit of 6.5% by mid-year. And then, yes, the question is coming, sir. Can you allow me to speak? Thank you. And then the Minister of Finance said we're projecting a 4% GDP by the end of the year. So we've got about 10.5 percentage point swing that has got to happen in the second quarter. My question is therefore, where are we going to get this 10.5 percent swing from what was reported mid-year as minus 6.5 to the projected 4%, because those figures are going to be used by investors and other people to actually make informed decisions about investment in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Honorable Sibanda.
Ngiyabonga, Madam Chair. I stand up here, Honorable Minister of Finance, to put more emphasis on the reason why we should have monies for the family planning set aside, not depending on donors only. When we have that money, Minister, when we have adequate supply of the family planning pill, it will help to empower women of Zimbabwe. It will also prevent sexual transmitted diseases. It will also reduce abortions, especially the unsafe abortions. Then this one is from the morning, Honorable Minister say. You kept on speaking a lot about countries' planned investment to ensure power generation. This is about power. However, the power generation seems to focus on non-renewable energy generation. Are you planning to set aside resources for investing on non-renewable energy? On non-renewable energy generation, yet other countries, or most of the countries world over, are prioritizing on renewable energy. Thank you very much.
I will move on to the Middle Bay because we had only 3 questions, and I hope and trust that the ministers will be capable to capture so that they will respond. Can I, Honorable Matambanadzo, I see the lady is that Mamombe, and the gentleman next, sorry, I can't see. Yeah, the gentleman next to him, you all speak, don't worry. Then the 3 at the back. Keep your numbers. That's Honorable Karenyi, Honorable Chikwinya, and then Makonya, in that order. Please, let's be specific and avoid making a further presentation. Thank you.
Maida Chair, mvunzo wangu rukwenda kuna Minister for High and Tertiary Education. Ndinotenda zvikuru kwazvo mataura kuti matuwanira mari yemaloans grants evana from the bank 15 million. And ndachiti nini yamuri kuzopa vana 30. Ndachiti mvunzo wangu ndokuti ine interest here mari. Nokuti yekare yanga ichibviswa negovernment yanga isina ma-interests. Ndo mvunzo wangu mukuru wandati ndibvunze pano. Handika uyezve mwana uyu apuwa loan iri akafa nokuti achabhadharwa nani, ndiani achave guarantor weloan iyi. Nokuti vana vazhinji vari kutambura vatachemera kuti vawane mari, vabereki vavo vakafa nechizvirwere zvakasiyana siyana. Maita basa.
Thank you. Honorable Mamombe.
Mazita, my question is directed to the Honorable Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development. I'm also part of the committee of Higher and Tertiary Education. My 2 observations when we went around tertiary institutions as a way of assessing quality assurance is the issue of benchmarking visits, which didn't come out clearly from all the tertiary institutions we visited, to say what is the ministry doing in terms of investing into benchmarking visits. Yes, we can talk about Education 5.0 and so forth, but we also need to invest in benchmarking visits. Then the second thing is the issue of alumni associations. I think most of the people, including yourselves sitting up front there, you have gone to universities in Europe, in America, and so forth. And I tell you, up to today, they are still following up on you. They are still checking up on you. Kuti makwite, where are you in terms of life and so forth. But as a country, I see we have that limitation, which we don't follow up on our graduates. So alumni associations, I feel they're also part and parcel of the developmental processes. For example, the issue of tapping into the diaspora, the issues of industrialization, because so I think if those graduates, they tap into the alumni associations, it will help them so that they can go and face the world. Implement the 5.0 or the industrialization or to start their own companies and so forth. So I feel those 2 issues, they need to be addressed by the ministry. The issue of benchmarking and the issue of investing in alumni associations. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Honorable Hamauswa, eh? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chair. My question is directed to the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education and Technology Development. I want to know what the ministry is going to do to help higher and tertiary education institutions to register companies which are going to produce the products they are actually coming up with. We realize that, for example, Mutare Polytechnic, they have been producing a number of products, but now when they want to compete with other companies, they are supposed to have company papers, CR14, CR6, but they said they are not allowed to register companies, or they are facing challenges to register companies. And then we come here, we say we want to see Education 5.0 materializing, meaning that we want to see products coming from incubation hubs to the market. How are we going to see products from incubation hubs to the market when those tertiary institutions cannot register their companies? Lastly, this is also directed to the Minister of Finance, Honorable Professor Mutuli Ngube. We see there is disconnection amongst the ministries, whereby the things that the ministry, for example, of higher and tertiary education is pushing, they are so much detached from other ministries like the Ministry of Trade. In terms of the goods that we want to produce, we should also be able to back our vision with statistics. Say, for example, where are we going to get the market of the products that we are talking about? You would realize that possibly the Zimbabwean market is too small, but we are not hearing the possibility of entering into the Zambian market. So we would want also to see a connection between and amongst the ministries, so that whatever we are proposing, we are actually going to have a clear direction that if we produce our goods, they are going to find markets within the SADC. Thank you.
Thank you. I said it in the beginning, one question per person, so that at least everyone else gets a chance to ask. Thank you. Honorable Makonya.
Maita Madam Chair, mubvunzo wangu kanangana na Minister of Finance, Honorable Minister Mtuli. Minister mataura nenye sanitary we, muchiti izvo muchabvisa duty ne tax. Asi mubvunzo wangu uri kuti ndeapi measures amuchaisa kune vanhu vari kuchaenda kotora sanitary we kunze kwenyika wouya nawo apa vanenge vashandisa mari yavo yavatenga pamusika mutema wouya nawo muno munyika. Imimi kuti vanhu ivava vazotengese nemari yakaderera zvii zvamunenge muchiita nekuti imari yavo havana kupuhwa mari nehurumende mazvita.
Thank you. Honorable Karenyi.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My question is about the issue of accommodation in universities. I believe most of the universities are not accommodating most of our students, and it is disadvantaging the girl child. You ask the landlord, most of them, they are charging $100 US per child, and parents are not affording. What is the government going to do about this in terms of the accommodation? Because vana vedu vazhinji, they have resorted into prostitution because ari kutotsvaga mashuga daddy kuti awane mari accommodation. Ungakwanisa iwewe nhasi kubhadhara because uri kuenda kubasa, but there are women out there vanorarama nemari dzekutengesa misika. yekuti aendese mwana kuchikoro. So government iri kuita sei mubudget ra2020 about this? And also government ichaita measures api for those people who have got accommodations and vari kubhadharisa vanhu mari yavasingakwanisi kuaccommodata. Zviri kunyanya kubata especially a girl child. Thank you.
Mazvita, last one on that segment is Honorable Chikwenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Muvunzo wangu wakanangana na Professor Manzi Professor?
Murwira.
Murwira, ehe. Professor, nyika yedu yakatarisana nedambudziko refuel kusanganisa diesel. Honorable Speaker of Parliament, tiri kumusangano we pre-budget seminar ku Harare, half-day workshop, musa 21 October. Vakaratidza ruzivo rwokuti pane project iri muministry menyu inofanira kunge ichitipa diesel kuburikidza nekusvina mafuta aya mu coal. Budget ra 2020 riri kuti kudii panyaya yekusvina mafuta aya pa project iyi kuti kwanise kugadzirisa dambudziko rediesel. Muvunzo iwowo ndoda kuti ungopushikira kuna Professor Mtuli kuti budget redu riri kuratidza kuti tinenge tichishandisa ma-RTGS. Maministry amuri kuona ari kupresenta mapapers awaya mabudget awo makavapa allocation yekuti vashande nayo in preparation for your final presentation. The majority of ministries, and certainly ma-ministries andinoita sit ma-committees awo, they have budgeted more than 6 times of what you allocated, and I'm sure the same has happened to the Ministry of Higher Education. Budget rema RTGS rinoshanda here kana kututa msango ya vanhu. Thanks.
Thank you. I have consulted with the ministers. They say they are comfortable in having the last set of questions from this pay before they respond. So I had the 3 hands at the back there. That's Honorable, the one, 2, then Gonese, and Honorable Mpofu. The one behind Honorable Mpofu. That's Honorable Mfumi. Okay, Msani. Honorable Gabusa, Honorable Mshai. And I see the one that's hesitating. Hello? Honorable Nyoni. Yes, Gonese I've already indicated. That's the end, huh? Takwana Teseka? Good,
right.
In that order.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Innocent Gonese, Member of Parliament from Mutare Central. I've got a serious issue of concern in relation to the utilization of agricultural land. We've got a dependency syndrome. We've got people who have been on the feeding trough who call themselves farmers since 2001. Where the situation where some of these people got nothing to show for it. Right? Then some of them got tractors, investors, and so on, which they never paid for. Now we have got a situation where there is funding. The Honorable Minister of The Honorable Minister of Finance has indicated that for the 2019 budget, they've allocated 4.3 billion into agriculture, which money, in my view, is going into a bottomless pit. And my suggestion is that those who cannot ship out, they must ship out. We must have a situation where we put an end to this. The issue of production, I think, is paramount. Those who cannot produce, but they've been allocated the land, that land must be taken away from them. We have got a lot of unemployed agricultural graduates. We have got some of us who have never been allocated land, who want to be given a chance so that we can see
Order, please. Order, honorable members.
So my question to the minister is that Are they going to put any mechanisms in place to ensure those who cannot produce have got that land taken away from them? We have talked about the land audit. Up to now, nothing has been done about it. We now need to put a full stop to this dependent syndrome, so that going forward, we have got people who can benefit the country by producing for the country, so that once again, Zimbabwe can become the bread basket of Africa. Thank you.
Okay, the next one, please. Hello, the next one in your order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question goes to Honorable Minister Prof. Murugera.
Let's be quick, please.
He highlighted the issue of innovation hubs. Maybe can he...
Name and constituents, Honorable. Sorry.
Mpopo Mapelanda, that is in Mbulawayo, where there is NAST. Can I get clarification from Honorable Minister?
Your name, Honorable.
I say Moyo Charles.
Okay.
Any other, Madam Chair? My question, Honorable Minister highlighted the issues of innovation hubs. And my question is, what is going to happen to the innovation hubs? He mentioned about NAST, MSU, Kati, Harare. What is going to be happening in those innovation hubs? I think it's very important. And is it in line with special economic zones? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good. Next one, please. Honorable Msani.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education for presenting very well on that I know very well, which is the industry. Minister, how are you going to complement the industry in actually improving the quality of that local industry, that is the industry that is running now, and also improve on productivity? Thank you very much.
Next one, please. Yes, Honorable Prof.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, mubvunzo wangu kada kufanana nemubvunzo wa Honorable Matamba Nadzo. Unoti izvo time yedu isusu pa example takatraina kuma colleges tichibhadharwa negovernment mari dzezvikoro, but taipiwa assurance yekuti ungapedza kutraina unozoshanda for so many years usina kubuda border kuti udzosere mari chikwereti chewapiwa nehurumende. Imi mabasa acho pane vana vamuchapa magrants aya, are you going to give them jobs kuti vadzosere mari iyi, kana muri kungoti marumura mosiya zviri kuitika mazuva ano? Uku bhengi riri kuda mari yayo. Are you giving them assurance that you are going to give them jobs instead yokuti vazogona kudzosera mari dzavo? Vanhu munovapa assurance ipi kuti mari zodzoka kumabanks mazvita?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Gabuza, MP Binga South. I want to say I really enjoyed the presentation by the Minister of Higher Education.
Order, please. The middle bay at the back there.
Madam Chair, the energy and eloquence from the Minister. But I was wondering, the issue about these hubs, why is it not possible to utilize the existing research institutions which are lying idle? We have several like Anderson Research, SIRA, DC, Grassland Research. They are all falling apart. The infrastructure is there. Why is it not possible that the little resources we have, we capacitate those that are there, then we move forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Mshai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Miriam Shai, Kwadzana constituents. Mine is not a question, but it's a plea to Professor Mutuli, the Honorable Minister of Finance. The problem that we have at times is that we have very beautiful documents that then just die or gather dust. If you look at the projects that Verify Engineering is supposed to be focusing on, They have solutions to the challenges that we are facing as a country. My plea to you is, can you commit that you are going to at least fund one of the projects that Verify Engineering is focusing on, so that we begin to solve the problems that we have as a country, like the issues of thermal power, coal to fertilizer project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The last two at the back. Your name, your constituency.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Ilos Nyoni, MP for Bura East constituency. My question is directed to the Minister of Finance, Professor Ngube. It's about Ekusileni Medical Center. The infrastructure at Ekusileni Medical Center was completed sometime in 1999. So that means it has been lying idly for 19 to 20 years now. However, I'm pleased that at least the minister indicated that something has been allocated so that this becomes a cancer center. However, we've heard about 3 or 4 false starts on that particular infrastructure. What is the minister going to ensure, what's the minister going to do to ensure that this time it is successful? Thank you.
Thank you.
Last but not least, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Tora Moyo, Member of Parliament, Gogo Chireya. May I know from Honorable Minister of Finance why Verify Engineering is not given adequate funding, and yet it has great potential. It has potential to produce 10 million liters of diesel per day. And or the other option, if we can't give adequate funding to Verify Engineering, why not allow a private partner to help? For instance, it could be a foreign-based company to come and do work with Verify Engineering to produce 10 million liters of diesel per day. Thank you.
Thank you. That sums up our questions. I will now ask our panelists to respond to the questions. You can actually arrange on who is going to take the floor first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. And I wish to thank the honorable members for points of clarification and questions. I will start by the question from Honorable Matambanadzo about loans and grants. He asks whether they have interest. Indeed, they do have, Honorable Matambanadzo. The only issue which is there is that you remember when we started the loan scheme, we started it being completely private with organizations such as Edulon, CBZ, and ZB banks. I mean, there were about 7 Getbacks. They were offering loans, but these loans were very expensive and they could be afforded by a few. Only about 15,000 to 20,000 students were on these loans because of the repayment terms. So we thought that we should now, government should target the disadvantaged people, because this was one of the problems that we were having. They are still operating, but they operate on a certain class of students. Now we have introduced this 30 million loan, thanks for the support from the Minister of Finance, which has better terms. These terms, still there is interest, but at least government is providing a guarantee just in case the students fail to pay due to one reason or another. But through this mechanism, we have been able to raise at least 2 times more than the amount that we deposit. I am sure that what we have done is to make sure that universities and colleges set up committees for selecting the vulnerable students to ensure that this happens. I'm also looking forward that this year the amount gets increased. We want to grow this fund. That's why we need interest to be paid, so that more students can access these funds. I hope I have answered that. Honorable Mamombe talked about 2 points. Benchmarking, which is very important, as well as the issue of alumni associations and promoting them. I agree. Although we are doing it, but we have to do more on it. And the fact that we are talking about it means we have to put more effort and make sure that we can do better. It's very important. On the issue, Honorable Hamauswa, what are you going to do on registration of companies? Honorable, our model, Education 5.0, is basically saying there must be a product at the end of every education. We are saying education must produce goods and services. That's why we are saying Education 5.0. That's why we are saying in the innovation hubs, good ideas are incubated and products are then legally protected, and at the same time, then they have to be transferred to the industrial park. We will facilitate the formation of companies. So far for universities, I can tell you that UZ has formed 4 companies already this year, and I can tell you that HIT has formed more than 5 companies already in pursuance of this kind of vision. Along this line as well, you would know, I think through your visit, you might have seen that UZ has applied for 49 patents, to register 49 patents, and 9 of them are successful, and 40 of them are still being processed. This is a first. The patent office was never been this busy. I was talking to the Deputy Director Mshai, and he said he has never seen such flood of applications before. So things are moving. However, for colleges, because colleges, and of course we'll be asking the movement towards the Tertiary Education Council, which is the movement towards making tertiary colleges operate in the same level with universities, and I think the committee has noted it, and we will be submitting this to you, honorable members, so that you rectify this issue in the tertiary colleges. Tertiary colleges are still constrained because they are like a government department, but we will make sure that we will rectify anything that is making them not register their companies that quickly, but actually it's permissible and it's a policy issue. I have to tell you that also HIT has got 19 patents that are being processed right now by the ZIPO, by Zimbabwe Intellectual Property Office. So you can see there's a good response to what we are saying, because it's natural. When you go to a dare where people are making X's, you cannot get out of that dare and you cannot make an X. I've always said, why do we have things that don't work? So what we are saying is that it's being received very nicely and it's happening, but there's still a lot of work that we have to do to encourage this whole thing. In terms of markets, 3 things happen at an innovation hub. 1, good ideas are submitted. 2, a technical team evaluates them. And a legal team protects them and submits the ideas to ZIPO for protection, and marketing has to be done for every product. We believe that Zimbabwe is importing most of its things. So we still have a big Zimbabwean market. And so far, with the Ministry of Finance, with the little money that we were given, we have now asked, for example, University of Zimbabwe to start researching on traditional grains, because you know we have a tobacco research institute. You know we have got a wheat research institute. We have a maize research institute. There's no Munga research institute here. There's no Rapoko research institute here. So these are the things that we are doing, because so that we can make things, we can make bread out of Zio, just like Zio make beer. Igulaga was kicked out of the market because I think it was threatening to enrich people who do Zio. I won't talk too much about that, but what we are saying is that our things can make things, and our things can make money. So this is the movement that we are making. Honorable Karenyi, you talked about accommodation. I agree with you, Honorable Karenyi. This is a huge problem. We did an audit, and out of 180,000 students that we have in this country, only about 15 to 20,000 are in student accommodation. We have a deficit of about 165,000 beds in our institutions. It's really true, and that's why, Honorable Chair was talking about our PPP model to build our accommodation. We are also pursuing our own building brigades model. If you go to Kushinga Pikilela today, you will find out that because this Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, it has got what we call the ITTD department, which is Industrial Training and Testing Department, which certifies all builders and artisans. So the ITTD department is the one that actually built the whole education faculty at Great Zimbabwe University. So we have moved away from contracting companies because we don't have money to pay them. We are now building using our own people. And I tell you, the Innovation Hub at the University of Zimbabwe, as an example, all the innovation hubs we are building using the engineers at those institutions and the builders at those institutions. Anybody who comes on a contract. And we have reduced the cost of those buildings by 10 times. So we believe if we use this model and we are given seed money for materials, we'll be able to also provide, besides the PPPs, we'll be able to build the accommodation on our own. Because really, now at Joshua Mkabu Kongomo, there was a building which was there since 2003, and this year we are going to finish it because we are transferring it to be done by our people. And at the University of Zimbabwe, the technical education building has been there on the PSIP since 2005. And we were allowed to now build it on our own, and we have disengaged with the company amicably, and we are going to finish it before the end of this year. So a building which was built since 2005, which was not finished, we are going to take less than a year now to build it and finish it. So we believe if Parliament supports us in that direction, whereby we are given money for infrastructure, but we never talk about a construction company coming to a university which is actually training the engineers themselves. I think the model that we were using was a bit flawed in that we were making people, giving people money who would never build anyway, and keep giving them, and nothing was happening. So something is happening. So we believe using this model, Honorable Karenyi, we will be able to move faster in providing accommodation for our students because it's in our interest. Honorable Chikwinya, the Coal to Fuels project is a very important project. And we are proposing that it be on the budget, and we hope Parliament keeps on giving, starts giving this project some money. But I don't want to be a crybaby because the Ministry of Finance just last month was able to promise us to give us the 4 million US dollars that the committee had asked for, so that we can start operationalizing the medical oxygen program at, which is at Feruka. What I can promise you is that this money is going to be released now, and Zimbabwe is importing gas for oxygen. In 2018, in March, babies were having problems in our hospitals because we did not have enough oxygen. And we now have the capacity. The plant is there. What is left is to buy the container bottles and just one truck and storage facilities so that we begin producing. And this, honorable members, is going to happen because now we have been given money. We are also going to do welding gas. You know, this country imports welding gas. Welding gas, so what we today is 31. We are constructing our acetylene plant, and it's finishing today. I told them finish it today. So it's going to be finished today. we were also given enough budget to make sure that it's finished, as well as a nitrogen. Nitrogen is the one that is used to cool things. So we believe that this thing now, that 4 million that the committee was supporting us to get, we have it. The minister gave us that 4 million, and we are going to make sure that it happens. Honorable Moyo, of the NAST, you asked about innovation hubs. What is going to happen to the innovation hubs? Innovation hubs are structural ideas. We are organizing ourselves to produce something. So at the innovation hubs, 3 things are going to happen. One, ideas are going to be submitted from research that we are going to fund. And they are going to be protected. The Minister of Justice is going to be very busy, I can assure you. Very busy processing patents for Zimbabwe. And we are just providing a way in which these things can happen. And also, these are going to cause the industrialization. They are a means to industrialization in this country. And I can assure you that it's not eloquency only. Surely eloquency, maybe if I'm eloquent, it's fine. But we are serious about what we do. We are convinced that we can change this country if we have a real good philosophy and good unity of purpose. And so far, we are being supported very well by our committee to make sure that we achieve what we want to achieve. We can do it. We must be humble, of course, very humble. But I can assure you, we will do it. When we started the innovation hubs, people thought we were dreaming, but the dream is now on the ground. So, on the other hand, Honorable Msani, thank you very much for the question. By the way, the innovation hub at Honorable Moyo at NAST is going to be officially opened next week, and we have bought all the equipment that is needed in that innovation hub. What we were only left with is air conditioning. Yesterday, we released 720,000 to buy that air conditioning. And NAST is specializing mostly in genetics. So they are doing, you remember now, they are, if there is a fire and somebody is burned out beyond recognition, NAST has now that capability to do that. We have bought all that equipment. And we believe that the innovation hub at NAST, which they are saying where ideas grow into something, is going to happen next week. We believe that this is the way to industrialize. We are patient. We know that it cannot happen in one day. But Honorable Msanu, you said, what are you going to do to existing industry? The purpose of training institutions is 2. One, to give birth to new industry, to give birth to new jobs whose names we don't know today. Just like today we have a juice card vendor because somebody was able to invent a cell phone. So we are tasked to produce jobs that don't exist today, whose names we don't know today. 1, these are the new industries. Number 2, to support the existing industry. That's why the polytechnics are there. So yes, our policy is to make sure that we have all those 2 lines open. Now, the other issue is about where do we get the jobs? This is exactly my point, Honorable Muyambo. Honorable Muyambo, I want to allay your fears to say that our current philosophy is very simple. It's telling us that jobs are created by skills. They are not created. If somebody tells you that they will create a job for you and you come and work, it's still a colonized mind. Jobs are created by skill. And jobs respond to human needs. People need to sleep. Therefore, you must make beds. You must make sure that people can go to sleep. People need to eat. It means that your education must produce people who can farm, who can do things, not who waits for another person as if they are waiting for some deity to come so that they can work for that deity. We are past that. We believe that is the way Zimbabwe could not move, because we thought jobs could come here and we work, coming here working from where. So we don't want really, I mean, when you analyze it, you see that jobs do not walk to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe makes jobs. Because we cannot say a country which cannot produce enough food for itself does not have jobs. It doesn't make sense. You cannot say a country that has got potholes on the road does not have jobs. It does not make sense. What kind of jobs do we want? We want jobs to fulfill the lives of our people. So Zimbabwe has plenty of jobs, but has very little skill. That's why we are working on the skill. So jobs will be there, and I can assure you, jobs will be there. Let's not imagine that they will come tomorrow by a magic wand. They will come through this industrialization process. I can assure you that today at Chinoi, we are building an industrial park at Chinoi, and if you will be invited to go there and see it, where we are making cattle feed now. And Chinoi, we were able to start this artificial insemination project last year, where we have capability to produce 7 million semen straws annually. And each costs something like $20 US if you are exporting, which means Chinoi University of Technology now has an industrial base worth 140 million US dollars. This is not fiction, it's there. So we believe that with patience, with unity, with the unity of purpose as we move as Zimbabweans, we are going to change this country for the better. So jobs will be there. But let's not say to people who create jobs for you and you don't say how. I'm telling you how the jobs will be created. This is exactly how they will be created. Let's not go around and just say, I'll give you jobs. Give how? You give job. No, it has to be worked for. Honorable Gebuza, thank you very much about, Honorable Gebuza is the one who said eloquent. Thank you, Honorable. I take it as a compliment, but it's conviction. Basically, you call it eloquence, I call it conviction. I'm convinced that this country will be changed by its people with the brain. And it's not, when you look at SEDIC, when you look at all these institutions are not buildings. It's about design. Buildings have been there for years. But if you don't design your processes in such a way that you go to the product, it will be buildings. Because an engineering building can easily be a church building. So it's not about the building. It's about how you design your processes. I can assure you that in some industrial places, maybe in Bulawayo, maybe in Harare, they are now being used as a church, but it's written something industry. So it's not about buildings at all. So our innovation hubs are not buildings. It's a concept for jumping out of the cage of colonization to working. So, and the other questions from honorables about verify engineering, I think this is for Honorable Mtuli about supporting verify engineering. I have got definitely some interest in this. I thank you, honorable members, for asking these questions, and Professor Mtuli.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Professor Mulwira, Minister of Technology. I now move on to Honorable Minister of Finance, Honorable Ncube.
Very well. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you very much. Let me start with your comments. Will we be incentivizing decent jobs? The answer is yes. Absolutely. On Honorable Nduna, the idea of 26 ministries each being given perhaps a gold mine to generate their own resources, well, it's an interesting idea, you know. Maybe sometimes we shouldn't just think within the box, you should think outside the box and even throw away the box. I think this is throwing away the box. Thank you very much. But it is out there. Let's mull over it. Let's chew the bone. From Honorable Senator Mpofu, the need for accurate figures. I think you misunderstood figures, Honorable Mpofu. The governor and I had the same figures. You see, the budget deficit, let me start. The growth, GDP growth rate that we are projecting to year end of 6.5, minus 6.5 negative, came from Treasury. And the central bank has verified it. So that's a figure that we're using. This is for GDP growth 2019, minus 6.5%. The budget deficit figure, which is a different issue, it's about about the state of the government finances. The target budget deficit figure is 4% of GDP, which is minus 4% of GDP. And that again is one figure. I think when you were listening to both myself and the governor, you mixed up the numbers there, but there is complete agreement. Then on one from, is it Honorable Sibanda, where you talked about the budget for family planning, that we need to give more budget. I just thought that I should let you know that in this budget, we allocated initially in February this year, January this year, 10.4 million towards the family planning budget line. We did that. And then at the, in July, during the supplemental budget, we added some more. Now the full budget is 16.3 million towards the family planning budget line. So we are doing what exactly you are asking, and I hope that you will allow for an increase in the 2020 budget, because it's you who has to approve. Now, let me press on. Then on the investment in non-renewable energy, very important question indeed, Honorable Sibanda. Yes, the Minister of Energy is seized with this issue. Their first step has been to get is to rather launch the renewable energies policy, which was approved by Cabinet a couple of months ago. So that policy is in place, and it is going to help us drive the joint ventures as well as investment into that sector, whether looking at solar energy, wind, gas, geothermal, including the mini hydro. That's also included in that. And we work with the private sector. We issue the usual IPP licenses. So the ministry is alive to that, and they're pushing that agenda hard to fill the gap in terms of energy production. But let's still not forget coal. We still have coal. We need to, in fact, the turnaround time sometimes is faster. So let's make sure that we support coal, incentivize energy production from coal. Let's not forget that. And in Treasury, we want to give all the incentives that are needed to make sure this happens. Then I'm carrying on. This is then there was a comment. Is it Hamauswa commented about perhaps some disconnection or incongruency across ministries. I think we're highlighting Minister of Higher Education and Science and Technology and Industry in terms of the type of approaches towards industrialization. No. They are completely connected. What Murira is talking about is what you call research-led industrialization, which is part of the broader industrialization agenda, which is commercializing the research ideas coming out of universities. What he has done under Education 5.4 is to create an entrepreneurship ecosystem that starts from research all the way to a bit of teaching, but mainly research, and then the incubation of the ideas, the innovation hubs, then industrial parks, then finally it's fully commercialized with the right patterns and the right type of funding. That's the ecosystem that has been created under Education 5.0, and it dovetails with what is happening in industry. In fact, we will refresh. I think someone tried to imply that. Refresh even the thinking around a broader industry itself. There's complete congruency. Then there was a question on sanitary ware. I must admit, your question wasn't crystally clear. So what is the problem if someone is able to import using funds? Of course, what is problematic is that they got their funds in the black market. That's problematic. But anyway, they've brought them in, and then they sell. Is there any difficulty? Maybe I missed something in the question. We may want to clarify maybe offline. I'm happy to, maybe I'll be able to deal with it offline if there's Yeah, it's Honorable Makonya, yes. Yes, so yeah, maybe let me come back to you. Let me just run through. Maybe there's something you may come back and clarify. So let's press on. And then Honorable Chikwinya, you talked about the budgeting RTGS that, votes will be the order of 6 times what is currently prevailing. Does it make sense to budget in RTGS? Oh, yes, it does. In fact, we expect to collect quite a bit in revenues in this year, sorry, in 2020. We're not inviting you to submit budgets that are 6 times over, please. Let's be prudent. Let's be more modest. 6 times is high, if that's what you're implying. Certainly 6 times is high, but at the same time, there should be a sizable resource envelope. We'll be able to support a decent budget for each ministry using Zim dollar as the budgeting currency. We worked very hard to stabilize the Zim dollar. Now, Honorable Gonese, you referred to issues around agriculture that we should kick out non-productive farmers. Through you, Chair, I'll invite Honorable Shiri to deal with that issue with your permission. He's sitting straight there. He has no mic, but perhaps he's coming later. But it would be good just to deal with it, Honorable Chair, with your permission. He's sitting right there.
Yes,
he can come for literally 2 minutes, and he's very eloquent. He will do it quickly and sit down.
Yes, Honorable Minister, you can come up front, please.
Thank you very much. I recognize the presence of the Speaker of Parliament, Advocate Mdenda, the Madam President of the Senate, Madam Chinomona, the Master of the Events Director here present, Honorable Ministers. I would like to respond to this very specific questions as to why we are not addressing issues to do with land which is being underutilized. I think we have to credit our farmers. They have tried their level best amidst a host of difficulties. We may want to look at the history of farming in Zimbabwe. When commercial farming started in this country, there was introduced what was known as forced labor, Chibaru, where indigenous people were forced to work on farms without any wages at all. You may also want to recall the existence of what used to be called the Loot Committee, whereby the British South African Company constituted a number of military people who would go raid cattle from indigenous people. Half the cattle were given to the company and half the cattle were given to local white farmers. So they had a good head start. And in the early days of farming in this country, when conditions were considered hostile by the settlers, and the wives of the settlers were reluctant to go out and stay on the land, they had to come up with a plan whereby the wives were actually paid a salary to stay on the farms. So when someone stands up and suggests that people got free inputs or free equipment, probably they need to take into account the realities of our situation. During and immediately after land reform, financial institutions were very reluctant to support farming for political reasons. And they were also reluctant to finance contract farming as well as outgrower schemes. So the farmers were left on their own. Government had to chip in the form of presidential input schemes as well as command agriculture. And that is what has sustained us this far. It's only recently, starting this coming season, that we have witnessed the coming back on board by some financial institutions, thanks to the persuasion by the Honorable Minister of Finance. We now have CBZ financing command agriculture. Stanbic has come on board. Women's Bank as well as Agribank have all come on board. We have also allowed people to enter into joint ventures, which means we have availed new opportunities, really. What it means is, in the foreseeable future, we foresee financial institutions taking over the financing of agriculture, and the government will have no role in financing agriculture except addressing the needs of the vulnerable groups. So the issue of land utilization has to be looked at in the context of the political realities of this country. I thank you very much.
Okay, order, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Can we have the Minister of Finance to complete the remaining 2 questions to respond to? Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Honorable Shiri, for covering that question. Now, the last 2 questions were on verify engineering, as to whether we've supported that. I would like to confirm that in the budget for 2019, we allocated 2.6 million towards verify engineering. You approved that. And then, so far, as of this morning, the disbursements towards supporting verify engineering is at 1.8 million. But my team tells me that there's been further requests from the company, through the company. All the 2.6 million will be spent, transferred to the company by year end. And I hope we'll approve an even bigger budget for verify engineering for 2020. Then on the innovation hubs, because it's a bit of a relationship, the current budget allocation for innovation hubs is 25.8 million for the record. Yeah? Okay. So that takes care of that. Then on Egusileni, I appreciate the passion that the honorable member, Honorable Nyoni, exhibited. They talk about Egusileni, but perhaps but I don't think you understood me well. I said that we haven't started funding Egusileni as a cancer hospital. My wish, this is me, is that we turn it into a cancer specialist hospital for the country, referral hospital. and then allocate something in the 2020 budget to support that project. So that's my request to you as someone who will have to approve the budget when it comes before you, when the approval process happens. And a footnote perhaps is through you, Chair, then I'll be quiet. Coming back to verify engineering and innovation hubs, you recall that you approved 40 million for the National Venture Fund and 60 million for the Development Finance arm of IDC. These funds need to be utilized. So again, don't be surprised if by year end you find that we'll spend some of those resources to support innovation hubs, entrepreneurship around innovation hubs, as well as verify engineering. You should not be surprised because it is the right thing to do. I thank you.
A round of applause for our ministers and our chairpersons. Thank you very much. That takes us to the end of the session 3, segment A, but we still have section B, which will take approximately 1 hour, 15 minutes. Yes. Order, please. Just check your programs. Yes, there was, hold on. That's the segment on my right, please. There's a proposal that we could have tea or a smoke break for 10 minutes. There's tea break. And we come back. But there's the bad part of it. I'm trying to moderate. We quickly have the acting minister and the chairperson of the Committee on Gender come up front. She does a presentation, the minister responses. Then we comment and then we depart. Second option taken? Thank you. So may I kindly ask the top table to take leave? Unfortunately, I'm still stuck here. Thank you very much. And whilst they are moving down to the floor, can I have the acting minister and the chairperson on gender to come up front? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you. Hello, honorable members. I'm being informed here as follows. That the allowances for members of parliament are based on participation. Yes, on sustained attendance. Therefore, members should adjust and not just register and then leave. Attendance is being monitored. Thank you. I'm reliably informed that Honorable Gumbo is the acting minister on women affairs, gender, and community development. So, welcome to the podium. Right. Can we have Honorable Madiwa to come and make a presentation? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Master of Ceremony. Let me recognize the presence of the Speaker of Parliament, Advocate Mudenda, the President of the Senate, Madam Chinomona, the Deputy Speaker, Madam Gezi, all ministers here present. Let me say all protocol observed. As I start to make my presentation, I want to draw you closer to the constituents that I'm talking to. I want every one of you to think of the closest person to you, who is your mother. Don't think about your wife, you'll divorce one. Some are divorcing, some are having quarrels. Don't think about your sister, she will get married. But think about your mother, the most loved person in your life. So, I'm also talking about, I'm going to talk about the informal sector, and your mother constitutes the highest percentage of those people who are in the informal sector. So I'm humbly asking you to, as I present, to be having your mother in mind. I will start by saying there is no tool for development more effective than the empowerment of women. And I'm glad the Minister of Finance here, as he was doing his presentation, he was stressing on the issues of empowering the youth, the women. Even the speaker himself, I could, in his presentation, gender mainstreaming was also given of some importance. But we are still having problems, or we are still lagging behind as a country when it comes to issues of women, when it comes to issues of these marginalized constituents. But to my surprise, as a country or as a continent in Africa, we have a great talent. We have great skills. We are very much people who are great thinkers. For example, I have highlighted there that we have great preachers who preach until buildings shake. People talk in tongues and until snakes comes to confusion. We have spiritualists who can make rain, send lightning, a case for infertility or fertility. And witch doctors who can break your family, steal your money, and yet we remain a candidate that does not know how to mainstream gender. Just a simple thing like mainstreaming gender or empowering women. For example, if I'm to look at the African talent, we have the best golf players, we have the best tennis players, we have the highest number of doctors and engineers working and developing the already developed world, Africa, and yet we seem to have challenges in just mainstreaming cross-cutting issues of gender in our work. So my issue is we are still having problems in issues of mainstreaming gender. I'm happy when I look at the theme of this 2020 budget, prudent deployment of resources for optimal economic results. There is the issue of inclusivity. It means there was the thinking of taking on board the marginalized groups, which includes women. And I will refer you to a book that was written by Douglas and Jane Jackson, How to Speak Human. And the other book The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, and which has been considered by Warren Buffett, who is the guru in investment, to be by far the best book written ever. These good books are looking at issues of, when they are saying how to speak human, when you are addressing issues of inclusivity, intelligent investment means taking everyone on board. And it means as you think about women in your investments, it means you are making the right decisions. When we look at Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe's commitment to gender equality is very clear. And it is amongst many countries in Southern Africa that have embraced the concept of gender equality and women's empowerment. We look at our highest law on the land, the Constitution upholds the principles of gender equality and women's rights, and the country is a signatory to a lot of several regional, international, and continental protocols on gender, meaning issues of gender are really taken seriously by our country. But still, we are still having problems in terms of, I think, implementation, in terms of making sure that we empower our women, in taking sure that issues of our marginalized groups are taken on board in our budgets. At country level, Zimbabwe has enacted a number of registration and policies that provide for the protection of women's rights. And you also have the National Gender Policy, which notes that which puts women's economic empowerment as key to the country's economic growth. But still, we are having problems. At institutional level, there are no institutional policies on gender. Still organized, in as much they are still guided by the National Gender Policy. But we need those institutional policies so that as institutions are operating, they are also guided by their own institutional policies of gender. But those are still lacking. And as we talk about gender, in as much as we have all these pieces of legislation, this is how I and my committee viewed how gender issues or how women's issues are taken on board. That is like we are constructing a road and head office is asking how our road project impacts on women, what we should do, what should we do? And the answer is, we'll just add a sentence on the document that women are going to walk on the road. So this is what is happening. We just pretend and we write statements to the effect that we are empowering women. But when it comes to implementation, there's nothing that we are doing, which is not what we want as a country. And in some instances, we are having planning being done without the people who are affected. We have several programs going on, but the very people who are supposed to be beneficiaries of those projects are not taken on board. So at the end of the day, the real issues of these people are not addressed. Section 1729 to 1742 of the TSP refers to the need for gender mainstreaming in national development towards Vision 2030 by enabling all forms of gender discrimination, financial inclusion, gender responsive budgeting, SMEs and informal trader support. And the Ministry of Women Affairs now houses the SMEs component, which according to the RBZ provides employment for about 5.7 million citizens, 2.8 million business owners, and 2.9 million employees, representing about 73% of the total workforce. And we should take note of the fact that, like I've said, the most people who are in this sector, the SME sector, are also women. So against that background, the ministry needs increased resources from Treasury and development partners, given the size of the informal and SME sectors. And given the fact that the informal sector, as we have been singing throughout, that now the informal sector is the sector that is driving our economy. The role of community development, women development fund, SMEs, cooperatives in the economy. The gender sector, which is under the purview of the ministry, is cross-cutting and provides the bedrock for value addition, beneficiation, and transition of SMEs into full-fledged industries and employment creation. And the World Bank review of household enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa confirms that the informal sector is an important contributor to economic development in low-income sub-Saharan African countries as a source of employment creation, earnings, and household livelihoods. And nearly 70% of employment outside farming is in the informal sector, and this is the case with our country. So as a result, we cannot underestimate resourcing the informal sector. Improving the productivity of informal enterprises is therefore essential for employment, income growth, and poverty reduction in the region. In terms of the 2019 budget performance review of the ministry submitted the 2019 first and second quarter reports. They were received, though they were lately submitted. And in these reports, the committee noted that human resources aspects were not covered in terms of establishment and strength. Yet the ministry has about 43% out of 43% of its staff establishment in place. The reports also did not clearly outline outputs and outcomes, as well as impacts. For example, the report referred to inadequate budget allocation, which results in cancellation of programs, but there were no details given. However, the ministry is commended for having a comprehensive strategic plan with qualitative and quantitative ministry objectives. Gender is clearly mainstreamed in the plan. They have to lead, they are leading by example. The plan had measurable objectives, very clear outputs and outcomes, and performance indicators. Concerning audit issues, the ministry received a qualified opinion for 27 and 2019 accounts. The ministry did not submit an annual asset certificate for audit. There's inadequate coordination and non-supervision of staff members at head office in provinces and districts. This was noted by the audit. And about 25 million expenditure whose payment vouchers were not produced for audit examination. During the financial year, the ministry did not conduct the inspection and audits of the cooperatives due to shortage of staff. We are looking at cooperatives throughout the whole country, but in terms of monitoring, the ministry is kind of crippled, and they are not monitoring some of their cooperatives. The 21,000 provided by UNDP Livelihoods Revolving Fund was disbursed through the SME Revolving Fund. The disbursement was not disclosed in the financial statement for 2017 submitted for audit. And there was no evidence of follow-up on the repayment of 15,200,000 which was disbursed to SMEDCO in 2016. And its training center as well doesn't have a place a mechanism to facilitate payments to be made using the various payment methods by prospective clients. As a result, some classrooms or some offices are being used as warehouses for free. The ministry also did not maintain a separate set of records for loans issued to women's groups. And the committee also noted that the ministry purchased motorbikes for monitoring projects in the provinces in 2014, which took almost 4 or 5 years to be dispersed, or they have not been distributed to the respective provinces. In terms of monitoring, this could have been used by the few members of staff who are in the provinces if they had been dispersed. And 16 projects which received loan disbursements amounting to about 33,000 and with an outstanding balance of 31,000 had ceased operations. The ministry also have some groups who have benefited from the loan facility from the Women's Development Fund, were not repaying the loans, although they had the resources to service the loans. For example, we have other members who have benefited, who are members of the civil service, but who are still owing for a number of years. And something could be done for these people. They can be in a position to pay back their loans. So there is kind of a gap there in terms of loan repayment for the Women's Development Fund. In terms of budget performance, I will not go through all those figures, but these are the programs that the ministry has and what has been released to date in terms of percentage. I will not go through, but you will find that not everything was disbursed. We have policy and administration, 46%, women and gender, community, 73%, but most of these funds maybe for the Women's Development Fund and the bank. But in terms of programming, there are no resources or very little resources for the ministry to carry out its programs. In terms of challenges and impact on service delivery, some of the challenges includes inadequate budgetary support, high staff turnover. The ministry is like turning into a training ground for other institutions. So in most cases, the ministry is having new members of staff. So every time they are kind of training their members of staff, and this is a challenge. And out of, we also have a lot of vacant posts within the ministry, which is structured from national to village level. And if they are only, for example, if they only have less than half of those posts filled, it means in terms of delivery on the ground, this is highly affected. And there's also, the committee also noted that there's low staff capacity to deliver all programs. Here, in other words, we are saying the ministry some of the staff members do not have the capacity to deliver ministry programs. And maybe this is not the ministry's fault, but the Ministry of Public Service. Because as they recruit for the ministry, they are just looking at someone who is degreed and send that person to the ministry. But gender issues, women's issues are technical issues, and people cannot just be employed. This was also noticed by the committee as it visited some of the provinces, that some of the skills that are required for this kind of work that the ministry is doing is not in the ministry's members of staff. There were lots of unmet targets due to bureaucracy in tendering processes, prices changing due to inflation, and there are also delays in enactment of laws. For example, mandatory sentencing of rape for rape and sexual offenses, delaying is in filling vacant posts. This I've highlighted. But in terms of laws, we have the mandatory sentencing for rape as well as the Marriages Act. This is also affecting the ministry in terms of delivery. 86.8% of staff members have inadequate office space. Only about 29.4%, mainly working at provincial offices, have access to a computer. But in this case, we are saying for someone to deliver, the environment that someone is working in matters a lot in terms of delivery. A positive working environment makes employees feel good about coming to work, and this provides motivation to sustain them through the day. But as you look at the ministry, especially in the districts where, most of the work is being done, one office is housing about 6 officers. And we look at the nature of the work they are doing. They are also into counseling. They are also into giving advice, especially to women. And they have to the other 5, when one is carrying out a counseling session, the other 5 will have to go out. So that at least, because you cannot counsel someone when you see. So this has to be looked into when we talk of making sure that our offices are habitable. I give a good example is Chimanimani. You wouldn't even think you are going to an office when you are there. So these are some of the challenges that the ministries are facing. And the key uncertainties, we have the macroeconomic instability, for example, inflation, exchange. How will this situation be like in 2020? Will there be preservation of buying power? Delays in unfreezing of vacant posts, which is highly affecting this ministry. Limited development partners, funding support. Climate change impact on women. When we talk of climate change, the very person or the most people who are affected by climate change are women. We are also looking at fast changing technology and how we can ride on technology to improve service delivery. How do we control or manage the damage effects of technology? So in terms of the scenario, the game board scenario, this is what the scenario is like, where we are and where we want to be. The ministry is very invisible. It is very invisible because I have talked about the issues of inadequate manpower, poor supportive framework, disempowered women. So the mandate of the ministry is highly affected by some of these factors. And we want to get to a situation whereby we have efficient and effective implementation of ministry programs. And this can only be done when we have adequate people in place, when we have the supportive framework to make sure that the ministry implements its programs. And as a committee, we also get some views of stakeholders, what they think should be included in the budget. The very first thing that came up, and in this case, the Master of Ceremonies is saying I only have 7 minutes. This is exactly I was expecting this, especially when women are presenting. And when it is a women portfolio committee or anything to do with the gender and women is done hurriedly. No, you never showed time to whoever was coming here. No, I did. Okay, okay, thank you. But these are some of the issues, these are some of the challenges that we are having. We don't take women issues seriously. And as we look at women's issues, we are always doing everything hurriedly. The first thing that came out of the consultations that were carried out, the issue of sanitary ware that was being sung by Minister Mtuli, I don't know whether he's still around. No, yes. Women were very clear about the subsidies and free distribution of sanitary ware. They were asking, why should we pay for womanhood? Why should I pay for being a woman? Women, they actually, they gave us how much a woman should spend every month to buy sanitary ware. And it's not sustainable. So, and one stakeholder actually said, why are you distributing? Condoms are everywhere, even in the toilets. Why don't we have sanitary ware? I didn't apply to be a woman, but yes. And every time I'm saying this, I'm actually asking you to think about your mother. Don't think about anyone else, but think about your mother. And financial inclusion, increased the funding of the Women Development Fund, community development, SMED goals, SMEs and informal enterprises, and collateralized the microfinance loans. We are talking about these women as having nothing. Because of their history, they don't have anything. They were not economically empowered. And they have been having challenges in accessing funds, even with the microfinance bank, because they do not have collateral, they do not have anything. So these are some of the issues they were raising. Full capitalization of the Zimbabwe Women Microfinance Women Bank and increased loans disbursements to women in provinces and districts. Women are against this issue of having the microfinance bank at national level only. Of course, there are agents, there are other systems in place to make sure that the woman in the village, but we are talking of the microfinance bank as a bank, as any other commercial bank. It should operate like any other bank. So women are not happy about having this bank just here, just in Harare, and using other systems to make sure that women, some women are saying we are waiting for the bank to come to our provinces. So these are some of the issues that we want to look at. Increased funding towards construction of safe houses in provinces. Adequate funding of Zimbabwe Gender Commission, Anti-Domestic Violence Council programs, especially awareness campaigns in rural areas. The Anti-Domestic Violence Council was put in place as a result when we enacted the Domestic Violence Act. And up to now, no resources have been directed towards the Anti-Domestic Violence Council. And it is actually a challenge for them to deliver. Special budget or creation of a special fund for unpaid care work for women in communities. Women are asking for a special budget for unpaid care work, considering that they are doing, women perform almost like 4 times unpaid work to men. Most of their work is unpaid. So they are humbly asking for a special budget. They are the ones fetching water, collecting firewood, because of their reproductive role. So, and they are asking for something because of that role. Creation of a fund to assist survivors of gender-based violence, specific resources also to be availed to support implementation of the CEDAW committee recommendations. This is a very serious recommendation that is coming from stakeholders, especially civil society. You will find that most of the activities being done, or most of the CEDAW committee recommendations being implemented are not being funded. Civil society at times is rescuing the ministry in terms of making sure that these are implemented. So there is that request to make sure that there are special resources are set aside to implement CEDAW committee recommendations. Increasing resource for strengthening gender mainstreaming and targeted approaches to government programs and projects that focus on economic stabilization, recovery, competitiveness to ensure equitable, effective, and efficient participation of women and men. And there were submissions directed to other ministries. Support for free maternal health services, whereby we are having women dying whilst giving birth. So there's that request to make sure that there is free maternal health services. Increase the schools in resettlement schools. I'm glad the Minister of Higher Education also highlighted this area. Water provision points of at least 500 meters from homesteads. When we talk of water shortages, let's not think of anyone else. It's the women who bears the burden. Increase the disbursements towards social protection programs. Economic reforms and drought has brought untold suffering to women. So target input support to women, including for climate support, climate smart technology. So as we talk of climate smart technology, we are saying let's have targeted inputs that are directed towards women. And in terms of the strategic goals to be pursued in the budget here, the ministry is also looking at those goals. I'm not going to be going through them, but these are the amounts that the ministry is looking at. And it is important that these are available to the ministry because they have limited resources when it comes to programming. It is very important to note that as we talk of women's issues, gender issues, they are very different from any other sector. It's different from Ministry of Roads, where you are going to see a straight road stretching from Harare to Bulawayo, or where you are going to see a very modern bridge that is constructed. When we are talking about women's issues, we are talking about the attitudes. We are talking about changing our mindsets. And this requires a lot of capacity building, awarenesses, and that's why we are saying a lot of resources or resources should be directed towards programming. There's also the Gender Commission, whose mandate is to, which is the Gender Commission involved in monitoring issues concerning gender equality and investigating possible violations of rights relating to gender, and also conducting research into issues relating to gender and social justice. And in terms of the 2019 budget release, this is how how the Gender Commission has performed. I'm also not going to be looking at, to be going through the budget, the 2019 budget performance, but this is, in terms of their activities, this is how they've performed. And in terms of achievement, the Gender Commission has carried out investigation on gender-related violations, and also the Commission acted on a number of gender violations ranging from sexual harassment, domestic violence, post-divorce property disputes, and also prison monitoring visits to some of our prisons, and reports with recommendations has been submitted to the Ministry of Justice and Commission of Prisons. And the Commission's 2020 budget includes investigation of possible violations of rights related to gender, monitoring compliance with all gender equality provisions, research on gender issues to identify gaps as well as inform policy, public education and awareness, institutional capacity strengthening. It is also very important that this is, the resources are availed. I remember when the committee was having a public hearings with the Gender Commission, they were talking of 2 maybe awarenesses in each province. And we were actually questioning as a committee to say, okay, 2 awarenesses, to what impact will that have to a population of more than 8 million women? And we have 2 awarenesses, each district, each province with about 8 districts, each district with about 40 wards. How many villages, and the population that is going to be at, and the Commission was reporting on 2 awarenesses per province. So, and they were also basing this on the fact that they don't have resources to carry out awarenesses. And we are saying as a committee, let's, the ministry's mandate is different because they are dealing with people's mindsets, and we cannot run away from capacity building, we cannot run away from awarenesses, in as much as some people might say workshops are not important, but the way, the way we want, they have to be impacted, this information has to be impacted in people, they really have to be capacitated. So these are some of the areas that have to be looked into. That means all ministries should scale up gender mainstreaming programs, from their human resources programs to service delivery. Let's not just talk about women and not really implementing this in our institutions. I remember the committee actually giving it as a key result area for ministers or permanent secretaries, how they mainstreaming gender in their respective ministries. The Zimbabwe Women Microfinance Bank should broaden its outreach targeting women. I have said about that one. And Women's Bank to tailor-make and collateralize the loan facilities which poor women can access without compromising on repayment. And facilities such as Women Development Fund, Women Economic Empowerment, SMART goals, SMEs, support to be given adequate funds to meet their targeted outputs and outcomes. And recommendations to the ministry, they should be broadened civic education and family laws, including gender-based violence, into rural and resettlement areas. When you talk about gender-based violence, I'm sure the issues of one-stop centers were very excellent to addressing issues of gender-based violence. And I remember in the 2019 budget, we stressed the issue of releasing funds to the ministry so that they have more one-stop centers, whereby victims of gender-based violence can access all services in one place. Rather than someone is abused here, that person is referred to police almost 10 kilometers away. From the police, they are referred to the hospital that is almost 50 kilometers away. At the end of the day, they just say, no, we don't, let me not report this case. So we have a lot of people. Just now, someone is calling me in my constituents to say a baby has been killed. The husband and wife are fighting, and the husband, in the process of trying to punch his wife, he punched the baby. And as we speak, there's a funeral. So some of the issues, we are taking these issues for granted, but they are happening in our communities. And completion of refurbishment of training centers like the Jamaica Inn and Roger Howman must be finalized in the 2020. We are talking of the Jamaica Inn as the National Training Center for Women. It will be a cost-cutting measure if Jamaica Inn or Roger Howman are working, whereby women, instead of looking for private people who are supposed to be carrying out training programs for women, these institutions are utilized. So the committee is recommending that resources should be availed so that refurbishments of these training centers is done. And that the ministry should finalize its integration with SMEs component that was brought to it in 2018, and to improve in resource mobilization through its retention fund facilities, and also the MENT monitoring and evaluation framework for the women to be put in place for the ministry. In terms of medical, Zimbabwe, we have highlighted that 61% informalization, and in the world, SMEs are contributing into the world's economic output and employ 2/3 of the global workforce. So we are saying, since the SMEs are contributing about 8.58 billion to the country's GDP, why can't they get just about maybe at least 30 million to the informal sector? We are saying this formal sector is the one that is contributing to the economy, to our GDP, but very little is being channeled to that very informal sector. So we are recommending that at least a substantial amount be channeled to the very sector that is contributing to the GDP. And we are recommending that offices, permanent offices, should also be acquired for the Zimbabwe Gender Commission, whose current rentals are 16,000 a month, and are increased by almost like 480%. And also resources should be channeled to the Gender Commission. The ministry remains, in conclusion, the ministry remains largely invisible on the ground. Its financial inclusion programs, the WDF, Women's Bank, SMEDCO, SME support, remain thin on the ground, especially in rural areas. The ministry refurbishment of Jamaica Inn and Roger Howman is taking too long to be completed, and construction of safe houses in provinces, while a major priority, remain unclear in terms of ministry targets. The ministry still grappling with incorporating SMEs portfolio, and the office space, furniture, recruitment of required staff remain unattended. I was rushing because the chairperson was always on me. Thank you.
A second round of applause for Honorable Madiwa for that presentation. Honorable Madiwa, you can rest assured you have my support. I'm a gender activist. I respect women's rights, both men and women. And I would want to believe that I've given you the longest presentation time. Those who were watching, I think during the time, I was writing 5 minutes to the people who presented earlier on. But I think, thank you very much. And without wasting much of your time, I know it's late, I have the pleasure and honor to call upon Dr. Gumbo, who is the acting minister of the Ministry on Gender. So, Honorable Gumbo, the floor is yours so as to respond to the findings. Where are we? What do we do? Are we to notice some kind of implementation in terms of the concerns that have been raised by the chairperson of the committee? And mind you, she's speaking on behalf of the 52% in the country, and I would want to believe that government, parliament, including the communities, will be able to get some good responses from government. Thank you very much. Honorable Gumbo, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, President of the Senate, Honorable Chinomona, with all due respect, I think it has been very, very unfair that this committee has not been given enough time and to make a good presentation. Firstly, I have just been able to be given their report after lunch because the minister and the permanent secretary are away. And I just have to stand in for Minister Stem Sonyoni, who is not here, and the permanent secretary. 52% of our population is women. And who is here who is not born of a woman? So women are very, very important. But that be as it may, I am taking this report, Mr. Speaker, sir, with the importance that it carries, and I will carry the recommendations that have been made by the committee for presentation to the minister so that they can be considered by the Minister of Finance for assistance. There are issues of challenges that the ministry is facing, staff turnover being one of them, and also I think some of the areas that the ministry is responsible of have not been covered, even in the presentation. The ministry is quite large. It also includes SMEs, as you know. And if you go around the country, you go to Makokoba, you go to Mbare, and you see what is there. CSO, it's an ISO. But the Minister of Finance has been talking about employment and the jobs and jobs and jobs. And this ministry, as far as I am concerned, is very, very important because I think many people today are living because they are able to look after themselves through self-employment. And me, standing on behalf of Minister Stem Sonyoni, believe that we should have been given time to look at the issues that affect this ministry. And if it were me, or if I had the opportunity to request that this time which we have been given now should have been deferred, it would have been better that it be deferred so that the presenter and myself would have been given enough time to look at the report. But I must say, the chairperson of the committee has tried to rush through some of the developments, the priority areas she could not even go through. Some of the challenges that are stated in the report which I am having here have not been talked about. So it's really unfair that this is what has happened to this very important committee. And I think the Minister of Finance is looking at me with a smile because he, I think, would have said he was going to have more requests coming from the Ministry of Women or Affairs, because I think it means quite a lot, to ourselves. There are issues here that one should have been able to go through, but I am not able to go through. I am a person who would want to be thorough in whatever I am doing. I don't want to rush things and just browse and appear like I know it all when I have not really consummated what could have been a very important presentation, particularly for the this committee and the ministry. The minister being away and the permanent secretary being away and the deputy director, I think, just arriving after lunch and presenting this document to me, Mr. Speaker, it leaves a lot to be desired. So I think somehow we have not been very fair to this committee. I am not in a position to take a decision on it, but I think the onus is upon the presiding officers to make sure that maybe this committee should be given time to make a presentation, and a proper presentation, so that people can be able to really, even colleagues, members who are here, I don't know what questions they are going to give to me, which I can be able to bring forward to the minister who is not here, because there's been no time given to me. It's both unfair to me being given the opportunity to stand in for a minister who is not here and a permanent secretary who is not there, and also no time to look into the report. I think you should have, Mr. Speaker, say this should be deferred and that time be given to this very important committee of, the Ministry of Gender and SMEs, because I think it means quite a lot to our people. I thank you.
Okay, Honorable Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where is this director? Can she identify herself? Or is it he? Where is he? You just came today?
Just by the afternoon plane.
Good afternoon, Honorable Speaker, the President of Senate, honorable members here present. I work in the ministry as a director, and I was only assigned to come down here by the Honorable Minister yesterday. But otherwise, I had been away on other business, and I'd only had to be recalled yesterday to come for this specific assignment. So I got a flight this morning from Harare, and we arrived around midday. Thank you, that's the situation. But I'm conversant with the contents of the report which the Honorable Minister intended to deliver, and I'm also able to respond to any issues that may be raised. So I am available. If there are any issues, I think I can competently handle that. Honorable Speaker, thank you.
Yeah, can we have a point of clarification? Does the acting minister have what was supposed to be given as a response by the Honorable Minister Nyoni?
Mr. Speaker, like I have said, This is the document that I've been given by the director. At lunch hour, I did ask the clerk of parliament, where are these people who are supposed to talk to me about this ministry, which I am supposed to stand in for this afternoon? And there was no one. But later on after lunch, I was given the document. And I think, with all due respect, Mr. Speaker, sir, to go through this document and consummate and make sure that you understand everything that is in it is not fair. But if the director is in a position to make the presentation himself, because maybe he's acquainted with it, as he says, in the interest of colleagues here, I'll be very happy to accept that. But what I got yesterday afternoon was a call from the Honorable Minister S.G. Nyoni, when she was saying she was in a plane, she was leaving the country, and that the permanent secretary was not available, and that I was acting minister of that ministry. When I came around, remember me when we attended SROC, I was acting Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, only to know that later on, I now have to act again for this ministry. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Can I have your attention, please? Thank you for the explanation, Honorable Minister, and it is definitely unfair to expect you to respond. What I suggest is we are going to dismiss now, and if the director can have some conversation with yourself, and then perhaps you might concentrate on policy issues, and the director can assist with the operational issues of the ministry that have been raised by the committee. And Madam Chair, I suggest we come exactly 8:30 tomorrow. Exactly 8:30 tomorrow. You take the chair, and we have a plenary for at least 1 hour. The Honorable Minister, Dr. Gumbo, will make his opening remarks after studying the document, and then we'll go into plenary accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the guidance. And with that, I think that concludes our session for today. I wish you a very good night. We meet tomorrow at 8:30 sharp. I don't know whether there are any administrative announcements from the Secretariat. I stand guided. If none, then I think we are all free to leave. Can I also release the Minister and the Chairperson?